To Deming. We have to get some formalities out of the way. Thank you. Emergency exit. Exit door there where these two cowboys are standing. Exit doors over here and also where you came in. Those are the emergency exits. Now, don't everybody go out the door that you came in. Use that one and use this one. We got plenty of exits for you. Now, if you would please stand, remove your hats for the singing of the national anthem by Debbie Armstrong. Then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance and we will have a prayer.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Father, as the events of the day continue, we seek your clarity and your counsel. As a group and individually, sort out some of the muddled feelings and distorted thoughts that plague us. Struggling for solutions among differing personalities can seem impossible. We are not expected to be perfect. We are told in the Bible that we will fail. We will all fail at some point. So as we meet here today, let us release the bind of blame in exchange for harmony. Help us to endure the disagreement and strife with godly courage and love. Grant us peace in knowing that we are pursuing your purpose for our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Now I'd like to turn over the MC to Erica Valdez.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you to everyone that came today. Those of you that are following on our live feed, thank you for logging on and watching this today. We really appreciate everybody's support on behalf of the Planning Committee. My name is Erica Valdez. My family and I ranch in southern Hidalgo County. We have a 12-year-old daughter that rides and works with us every day. And this subject is very near to my heart. I cringe at the thought of the conversations I've had with her, preparing her to gather cattle, be away from us for several hours, you know, not getting down in washes, staying up high, paying attention to your surroundings. There's not any conversation you should have to have with a 12-year-old. So I think it's important to know that this issue affects everybody, whether you're 100 miles from the border or 1,000. It affects everybody in this room, everybody in this country. The drugs are here. They're going to continue to come here, and they are in every city in this country. And the sex and human traffickers are targeting kids and children from all over the country, not just border cities. So I think it's really important that we come together and portray a united message, regardless of political party, regardless of religious affiliation. So I really appreciate everybody that came today. We have a very diverse group of public speakers that are experts in their field and have witnessed and seen things that none of us have, and it's going to be very educational. I'm really excited. So without any further stalling, I'm going to call Richard Wootton up here. He's a New Mexico native who graduated from Albuquerque T.V.I. in '99 as a registered respiratory therapist. He worked at U.N.M hospital until 2002, when he moved to Deming and began at Mimbres Memorial Hospital as a respiratory therapist, where he stayed until he retired in 2018. Thank you.
I hope this audience isn't hostile. My name is Dick Wootton. Like the lady said, I'm a New Mexico native. I was born and raised in Albuquerque. I lived in Roswell for 13 years. Got transferred back to Albuquerque, where I worked up until, I guess, I'm trying to give you a little bit of a background history on me. I was about 55 years old. I started thinking about retirement. And the realization came to me that I didn't want to retire, but I didn't want to do what I'd been doing for somewhere in the neighborhood of close to 30 years. I began exploring opportunities. What I found was I thought the healthcare business might offer an opportunity that I would enjoy doing, one that would make me feel like I was making a contribution, and one where I wouldn't have to be nice to people in order to get them to buy something. I began exploring, and I settled on respiratory therapy, not really truly knowing what it was. But the more I got into it, the more I decided to explore it further. And what I did while I was still working, I started taking all the prerequisite courses, got all the prerequisites out of the way, and then I got into the program, went to school full-time, went to work at U.N.M hospital about 6 months before I graduated. And when I did graduate, I worked at U.N.M until I moved here to Deming. I don't know how many of you or how much of you know about what a respiratory therapist is. And I'm going to try and simplify it. Respiratory therapist works with anything or anybody that coughs, sneezes, snorts, grunts, or howls. When we're doing a code, we're at the head of the bed. We have the airway. Sometimes we will intubate, or sometimes we will assist the intubation and manage the ventilator. And it goes on further from there. In the course of being in school, and I think this is probably the reason why I was asked to say a few words. As a little kid, riding around with my dad, there was a place in Albuquerque called St. Joseph's Hospital. Across the street from St. Joe's was a bunch of bungalows. They all little tiny living places, all had a screened-in porch. And I remember asking my dad, "What's that for?" Well, he said, "Those are for the lungers." Well, what's a lunger? Well, that's a consumptive. What's a consumptive? Well, They're for the people that came to New Mexico for the dry air, for TB. And later, because that image stuck with me, when I got into school, and more particularly when I got into microbiology, I realized that TB was not something that I ever really wanted to work with. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. Not anything that I wanted to expose myself to. And in the course of what this gathering is about, is that we have a problem that nobody seems to pay a great deal of attention to, and that problem lies within healthcare workers and law enforcement workers. The number of people that you get exposed to in the course of a day's work, and you don't really know what's with them, you don't know what they have, you don't know what they brought with them, you get a certain respect. I'm only going to dwell on a couple of airborne diseases here because there are way too many to take up your time, because I think there's more important things to be discussed here at this gathering. I told you before, my concern was tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, it is spread, and I'm going to use an analogy that some of you might find a little inelegant, and perhaps you'll realize that I took a few artistic licenses with it. But have you ever worked in a room with another person, and everything is going along quite nicely, and all of a sudden you go, ooh-wee, that guy really should have backed off on those bean burritos. Well, that's kind of, in a very offhand way, that's how tuberculosis goes out. A tubercular guy is, every time he coughs, every time he sneezes, he liberates droplets, and those droplets have tuberculosis, it's Mycobacterium tuberculosis. If you happen to be downwind or you happen to walk through that cloud, there's a chance that you might be infected. Not a pleasant thought. Now, I don't want to spread scare stories here, because a person with a healthy immune system will probably never ever know he got infected. But because I have such an aversion to this particular subject, I found out, well, for all that I know, I was exposed to multi-drug resistant tuberculosis at least 4 times in this hospital. That's 4 times that I know of. Now, I want you to think a little bit about the number of people that are involved that can get exposed to something. And you got to remember, the World Health Organization ranks tuberculosis as that's among the top 10 killers in the world. Mexico and Central America have 10 times the number of tuberculars that the U.S. does. There are other countries that aren't so much of an immediate concern to this group. For instance, the Philippines has like 322 per 100,000 population. That's a lot. The average tubercular who is untreated, walking around, can infect probably 10 to 15 people in the course of a year. This is not something that you really want to have happen. Nobody really thinks about this. Let me give you an idea. When the Border Patrol brings a guy in off the desert, he's asking for medical care, they bring him to the hospital, they want medical clearance, bring him in, nobody really knows what the problem is. Let's take a look at the number of people who get exposed to this thing. Start out, well, the poor old housekeeper. Housekeeper's in there emptying trash cans, tidying things up, in comes the patient. Well, the first thing that happens after that is you have one of the phlebotomists come in and draw blood. Now, if you've ever had blood drawn, you know that that phlebotomist is right up under the gun, if you will. And if for some reason or another there's any suspicion that there might be a respiratory element in here, people like me or me might get called in to draw a sputum sample. Well, in order to draw a sputum sample, I have to give something that will make this guy cough. This is not a good thing to have happen to you when you're dealing with a tubercular. But then you go on after there, and if my sputum sample raises suspicion in the lab, they send in the x-ray people. Well, either two people come in to take the x-ray, or they haul the patient down to the x-ray department, which means going through the ward, into the x-ray department, back through the hallways, back into the ward. We don't know how many people are exposed in the course of that trip. Then we go, pardon me, from there we go on to, well, the nurse. Gosh, anybody think about nurses? How much time they spend with those people? How inevitably, when that nurse goes in, probably the first thing she's going to do is start an IV line. Well, you start an IV line up close and personal to the coughing and sneezing apparatus. And last, and certainly not least, the physician comes in. The physician is poking and prodding and checking. Think about the number of people. Oh, we've overlooked at least a couple of people. We've overlooked the dietary people who come in, bring that person food. All of these people are exposed. Now, again, I want to repeat, not everybody who's exposed becomes infected. If you have a healthy immune system, you're going to be okay. But let's look at the alternative for a moment. And frankly, I got to pull out a note here because I can't keep track of all these things. When a person applies for admission to this country, for legal admission to this country, they have to go through a series of tests. They have to prove inoculations, like they're checked for vaccinations against mumps, measles, rubella, polio, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, flu type B, hepatitis B, some cases smallpox, because in spite of our best efforts, there are areas in the world that still have smallpox. Then they have blood tests. They're checked for STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, primarily syphilis. They have a chest x-ray done. They have an evaluation for mental illness or drug addiction. They're checked, in some areas they're checked for leprosy, cholera, and any severe respiratory syndromes. Now, how do you feel? Do you want to deal with somebody who came through the port of entry with a visa, who's gone through this? Or do you want to deal with the person who came through Antelope Wells, either in the middle of the night in a group, or perhaps came over knowing full well that they couldn't get past the admission process because maybe they had been deported previously, or maybe they had a criminal record that would show up. So they come across with the dopers, who are a couple miles away from the group that has overwhelmed the Border Patrol, and they come across, and we don't know how many of them are involved because nobody ever sees them. It is difficult for me to quantify this. I'm just going to very briefly tap on a couple other things. because I think this meeting has a lot more important things than I have to say. And I think that it has things that most of you people are more interested in than what I have to say. But I think it's good that you can have some awareness of people who you may not have thought of who are affected by this epidemic that we have, and it truly is an epidemic. And I'm kind of like Will Rogers. All I know is what I read in the newspapers. Well, in today's age, that's not necessarily a recommendation. But if you read enough, if you listen enough, and if you think enough, you start getting some insight into what the truth might possibly be. And I think the truth of it is that nobody really realizes the people that so many people feel sympathy for, that they are simply seeking a better life. But in truth, when they hit that border, nobody can see the microscopic baggage that they're carrying. And it is a serious, serious concern for all of us. I think nobody here is probably alive. Nobody here was around when the Spanish flu hit the world. I think it was 1917 or 1918. I don't know how many million people they killed. I wonder how many people here think about measles. This is when I was a kid, everybody got the measles. You did it, and sometimes if you got the measles, your mom put your brothers and sisters in with you so that you could get all at once. Well, the measles are kind of like TB in there. You are contagious with measles 4 days before the rash begins, and you're contagious 4 days after the rash begins. Well, that's pretty good, but what a lot of people don't realize is that if you have been somewhere 2 hours after you've been there, you are leaving measles virus suspended in the air for someone to walk through to catch. Now here's something that anybody can check, and again, all I know is what I read. Clark County, Washington, right across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. Clark County is one of those counties where the school district is very lenient in terms of whether children are vaccinated or not. It's very easy to get a waiver if you have either philosophical or religious objections to vaccination. Some places in Clark County, Washington, not every place, but some of the schools have like 40% compliance among their children. Beginning, I'm not sure the beginning, I think it was sometime in January, there was a state of emergency declared in the state of Washington. They had an epidemic of measles in Clark County. Now, when we think of an epidemic, well, I go back to that Spanish flu analogy, but up there, and the last I read, and several days ago, they had 75 cases of measles. But the state of Washington, and this is true, they declared a state of emergency. They sent 600 various and sundry types of healthcare people to attempt to knock out that epidemic of measles. The overall cost to the state, and again, this was the last I had read, over $1 million. The overall cost to Clark County, Washington exceeded $500,000 at that time. Now, what do you suppose a $500,000 bill would do to Luna County? There was an article in the Deming newspaper yesterday that was talking about measles, and that they said that they thought there were just under 5,000 children unvaccinated in New Mexico school systems today. Well, now remember, this is statewide. I don't want to overstate the case. This is an epidemic waiting to happen, and it could happen. And guess who might bring it? I think that I would like to kind of wrap this up, because I don't want to be a fearmonger. I don't want to cast a light. I think it's what I would really like for people to do is to think about the effects that these problems have on the I would call them the frontline people, the law enforcement people, and the healthcare people. I've read a lot recently about a lot of border patrolmen are having problems. And let me put it this way: how would you feel about taking home a case of scabies or a case of lice to your family? Well, when they're processing all these border jumpers, they get them, and it's real. And that's not the worst thing that can happen to them, but it's one of the little things that they get little or no recognition for. And scabies is no fun. It's not life-threatening, but it certainly is no fun. Let me kind of wrap this thing up and we can get on to the important part of this meeting. I think that there are some people who see this gathering, well, I think some of them might even go so far as to say, this is a bunch of redneck racist crackers who came in to get together in order to fight the browning of America. Well, I think that's really unfortunate, because I would stake a month's wages that there are many people in this room who, in times past, have left food and water out for the migrants. They have offered shelter for some of them. They have given clothing to some of them. It's really, really unfortunate that the state of affairs has degenerated down to a case where the people who live either on the border or in proximity to the border do not see a stranger and welcome them, offer help. What they do is react in fear. And I would say that that old rural neighborly spirit, the spirit of compassion, and maybe the milk of human kindness has been soured by the venal, the callous exploitation. And I'll just go ahead and use the general term, the cartels, in order to use our border areas to traffic their drugs and to traffic their people. And that milk of human kindness has really, really, really gone sour. And I think the primary cause for it, and this is my opinion, is because we have too many holes in our laws and in our border. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I really appreciate that very much. For those that are coming in late, there's lots of open seats up here toward the front. I see empty seats everywhere. If you don't want to stand through the whole thing, you're welcome to come on up here. They might say reserved on them, but if they're not here by now, they don't need them. Is that rude? Sorry. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Gary Thrasher. He was raised in rural Ohio. He received a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree from the Ohio State University. He came to Arizona's border with Mexico as a captain in the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps in 1971 and decided to make it his home as a livestock vet once his military obligation was completed. He's been a ranch vet, consultant, and ranch and feedlot manager ever since. His home is 3 miles from the Mexican border in the San Pedro Valley of Arizona. Most of his career, he has traveled extensively doing vet work at remote ranches on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico international boundary. Ready?
I do have some notes, and I guess I won't be as peaceful as you are. I fully agree with everything you're talking about. For many years, I've tried to explain to people all along the border what I run into. For 15 years, I had a business in Mexico, traveling every one of the northern states of Mexico, all through it, doing livestock work for importation of livestock into the U.S. What's being talked about all over the U.S. in the veterinary community, the large animal veterinary community, those of us who take care of livestock, who have an obligation for that type of thing, are transboundary and zoonotic diseases. Transboundary diseases, it speaks of just what it says, those that move across boundaries. Zoonotic diseases, those that affect people and animals as well. They used to call them exotic diseases. Now they call them emerging diseases because they just are emerging in our environment. Doesn't mean they haven't been all over the world or somewhere in the world. It's just that they're emerging now. The thing about emerging diseases in humans is that 75% of them are zoonotic, meaning they are carried by animals, or animals get them as well as people, or they do. And most of those are carried by some type of vector. By vector, they mean a mosquito, a tick, a flea, some other thing that's carrying it. People can be vectors moving them, just like you're talking about. Tuberculosis has been a problem for many, many years. It was tuberculosis, brucellosis, screwworm eradication. When I came here in '71, that kept me busy, believe it or not. Just those 3 diseases, traveling from ranches to ranches, try to do that. We had a brucellosis eradication program that's still going on today in the United States. We've almost totally eliminated it, except in certain protected areas like Yellowstone National Park, where the bison and the elk still carry it. But south of the border, most of the states south of the border still have problems. They have epidemics in humans carried by it. Brucellosis is one of those diseases that's transmitted to animals primarily through milk and the afterbirth, believe it or not. So at the time that the brucellosis campaign was started in the United States, 40% of the population were rural people. They got exposure to those animals. They saw cows calving. They saw goats calving. They drank raw milk. They handled milk before it was pasteurized. It was a serious problem, those things. Today, what have we got? We got people going back to unpasteurized milk. We've got cattle moving interstate illegally, that type of thing. Brucellosis was a problem. The other one that started even 40 years before that was the tuberculosis campaign. And it wasn't until 1986 that Arizona was free of brucellosis and TB. It's taken all those years and millions of dollars. The reason why the government spent so much money on that was not to help ranchers or farmers. Sure, brucellosis will cause a reduced calf crop, and economically it's a problem. The real problem, though, was they were human diseases. They were diseases that were passed on to humans. There was a public health significance to them. So we spent millions, and actually, if you totaled it all up over those years, probably billions. And it's still a serious problem. We eradicated screwworm from this area, and where did we push it? We pushed it south. All those programs we'll probably never, ever be able to do again because of the type of science that we had back then and the type of enforcement we had back then. I was between ranch owners and federal authorities with guns pointed in both directions over whether they should test their cattle or not, because when they were tested and came out positive, they were put to sleep. At any rate, what's happened over the past 50 years that I've been in practice is the U.S. has been really protected. These type of eradication programs for all kinds of public health diseases, tuberculosis and all those that he's talking about, have really been successful in the United States. They've been successful in Northern Europe too, but most of the world it hasn't been. Central and South America is way behind. What's that done to us? It's created a population of people who have never been exposed to those type of things. It's created a population of people that are immunologically naive. In other words, you don't have an immune response that's going to come right up that's created by continuous exposure over the years. You've been protected. You are more susceptible than a population that lives with it all the time. You really are. Tuberculosis is a very serious problem. When we were trying to eradicate tuberculosis here in New Mexico, and I also practice in New Mexico and West Texas, many of you here probably remember the El Paso milk shed. It was a tremendous dairy area. It's still a dairy area, but nothing like it used to be. They would eradicate tuberculosis, test all the cattle, kill a whole group of cattle when they came up with it, slaughter them all, leave it vacant for years, put cattle back in, boom, what happens? 6 months later, they got it again. I mean, it just was almost impossible. Everybody wanted to try to find the cause why it kept coming back here. We knew we had it in the dairies in Mexico, all the way down to Camargo, all the way down the rivers that way. But how did it get here? Well, they blamed the birds, they blamed the mice, they blamed everything else across.
Dr. Thrasher, would you just pull the microphone closer to you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you didn't miss everything. I won't start over. Don't worry. At any rate, my suggestion when we were testing there was, why don't we test the people working there? Where was the most typical exposure to tuberculosis that could come in? Well, just exactly what he's talking about. Politically, though, our government would not even approach that. They wouldn't even think about saying, maybe we should test the guys feeding those baby dairy calves in those hutches. Maybe that's where they're catching it. They haven't, it was 28 years ago, I think, that I first suggested that. The first proof of that was just this last year. Can you imagine that? Politically, we have avoided, protecting ourselves with it. And what happens today? Where do a lot of these illegal immigrants come, and where do they go? Many of them work in dairies all over the United States. All over the United States. At least tuberculosis test them. Just like he says. You know what? I work with import-export animals all the time, going back and forth into Mexico, horses and cattle going into Mexico that we sell to them, stocker cattle and feeder cattle that come out. We actually cross 1.25 million feeder steers or heifers every year into the United States from Mexico. Where do we do it? We do it at the ports of entry where they have facilities for it. Santa Teresa is the biggest in the world. Nogales, Arizona, Douglas, Arizona, Columbus, New Mexico, Presidio, Eagle Pass, Del Rio, all the way down there. They all have corrals, and those cattle are quarantined on that side until they can be proved that they've been TB tested, dipped for ticks, cattle ticks, believe it or not, which are a vector of a serious disease, a vector of lots of different diseases, as a matter of fact. But at any rate, we inspect those and before they come into it, and the USDA has managed to do it without causing an outbreak of foot and mouth disease or any of the other diseases, glanders and so on, that cattle or horses can pass into the United States and contaminate a herd. 1.25 million a year done that way. How many people are actually tested for those type of things? My pipe dream is we have a mini Ellis Island at each port of entry where we can quarantine and test and do just what you're talking about. Make them come in legally and go through the health things that need to be done. we have really got to be careful. The public health concerns for diseases that are common to livestock, animals, and people in Central America and Mexico are a real threat to our population just because we're so immunodeficient when it comes to exposure to those type of things. You cannot argue that there isn't climate change, by the way. You know, for some reason they think that rednecks don't believe in climate change. Well, I just drove by the Wilcox Playa, and you know, it was full of water one time. I think the climate changed. You know, the climate changes from time to time. If you go from here down around the Big Bend and look at those flats all along the river there, there's a weed that's growing there right now. They call it big reed. Have anybody seen it? It looks like bamboo. It's a great big weed kind of thing that really is a mess. It wasn't there 40 years ago. It kind of migrated into it. How it does that, nobody really understands why, whether it comes in vehicles or it comes on people or what it comes on. At any rate, it has changed the environment there directly. For many, many years, Texas has had what they call a tick zone, Texas cattle fever tick, a babesia that causes a severe disease that stopped Texas cattle from going east anywhere for years and years. They still have a belt there because Mexico still has those type of ticks that carry it. We're having more and more problem with it. Why are the ticks moving into there? Believe it or not, it's because we've got a little bit of change, whether it's climate change or just an invasive weed. It has changed the environment of that riverbed where it used to be dry patches where there was brush here and there and fire ants all over the place. Today, those reeds are so big and so solid that the fire ants can't survive. So what's that got to do with it? Well, fire ants are predators for the tick that carries Texas cattle fever. That's how complicated this kind of thing can get. It gets silly. You know, so there's a lot of things you have to really pay attention to. When I first came here, what really interested me in the military, in the Army, is one of the first assignments I had was take off your uniform, get into that unmarked helicopter, take that vaccine down to Mexico, and teach those veterinarians how to use that new vaccine. It was for Venezuelan equine encephalitis, VEE. You know, a lot of people still vaccinate for it. In 69, 70, 71, we had an outbreak in Texas, South Texas primarily, killing horses and making people really, really sick. Some people died of it even, and they still have it in parts of Central and South America. The reason why the Army had the vaccine and no commercial vaccine was available was that vaccine was developed at the Army's Institute of Pathology to protect them against biological weapons. It was considered a biological. Now we use it all the time. It's commercially available all the time. That was one. Another horse disease that's been in Mexico and is still in Mexico, that at one time was the scourge of all the military, is called glanders. It's a horse disease. It's a serious, serious disease in horses. When I was working in Mexico, I saw it in Mexico. People really know it in Mexico. Just last year, a burro strayed from Mexico was diagnosed with glanders in the U.S. Glanders is also one of those diseases that was used as biological weapon. It was used so recently as biological weapon as in Afghanistan in the 1980s by the Soviet Union, or Russia, whatever they called it then. So a lot of these diseases can spread and cause all kinds of problems. Something as simple, you know, we worry about foot and mouth disease here because it's such an astronomical economic problem when it gets into our cattle herds, where it can come in and how it can come in. Mexico doesn't have foot and mouth disease, but South America had it not too long ago. It's easy to move. It could be moved. It's in the Middle East. It's in a lot of different areas. It can be moved very easily. The enormous outbreak in Great Britain that almost completely destroyed that economy of Great Britain for many years had a lot of different ideas about where it came from. They've pretty much proven now that it came from an ethnic sausage that was being imported legally into Mexico to a chain of sandwich shops. But then when they discovered that there was foot and mouth disease in that state, they outruled it. So they began smuggling it in small quantities and in luggage. It came into Great Britain as a component of a sandwich. The problem was the trash was thrown out, and it was thrown out and fed to hogs. Hogs carry foot and mouth disease. It wasn't properly cooked before it was gone to hogs. It went, believe it or not, the hogs got it, lost their ability to eat and do as well as they normally should, so they were culled. They went to this local sale barn. The local sale barn also sold sheep. Sheep catch it real easy and spread it real easy. The government of Great Britain at that same time was paying a supplemental income based on the number of sheep for those people to try to keep the sheep business going. And they based it on your count of sheep. This sounds silly, but they actually did. So what they would do is they go into one county at a time and count the sheep that the man had there. Then they go to the next county and count the sheep the man had there, and they go to the next county. So the sale barn sold the sheep to the guy in the next county. He had those sheep for a week or so. They sold it to the next county. They just spread it all over because of a government program. A silliness that can happen because of these diseases, how they do it. The combination of a lack of immunity on our part, the lack of vaccinations anymore, and he hit on a little bit, and I'll just say that people have gotten the idea that vaccines are some way difficult. Boy, I'll tell you what, I virtually vaccinate thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of head of cattle and horses and other animals and dogs and cats with almost absolutely no problem with that type of thing. Where they've really gotten carried away with it, our internet provides a lot of information, but a lot of false information, so be very careful when you start thinking about those things. If you have kids, certainly vaccinate them for measles and typhus and all that type of thing. He mentioned a few of the outbreaks that are going on. I always like to have physicians in the area. Have you seen dengue fever?
Yes.
Well, dengue fever is not very common around here. It damn sure is common in Hermosillo. Have you seen chaga?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
People have it right here, and it's endemic there, and it's carried by the little black and brownish kissing bugs, you know, that suck on your lip. Those diseases not only are active, quick diseases that look a whole lot like flu, but they have long-lasting, permanent effects that can affect all kinds of things and cause problems for many years. Hopefully, especially medical doctors along the border are becoming aware of that. My wife's an RN, works in a doctor's office, has for more than 50 years. And she has to remind those people sometime. I give her a book that's emerging in exotic diseases, and they look through it and they call me about it. It astounds me, the physician that called me, did you ever see that? Yeah, I did down there. Well, I better, they better pay attention to it. Right now, in the last 2 years, typhoid fever, they've had an outbreak in Los Angeles, measles in Seattle, just like you're talking about, mumps in Houston. Unvaccinated populations combined with changes in the environment because it's a little bit wetter than what it was a few years ago or whatever, along with the exposure of a mixed population that are not protected. I look at the border when people coming across here and the mixing of the legals, illegals, and legals, and native population, and people coming from all over the world to travel, people that come down here on vacation, they get sunny Arizona, and I look at it as just like a bunch of cattle that are being shuffled through a sale barn where nobody knows where they came from, how they were prepared, what they were exposed to, what they were. And in the cattle business, we call that a recipe for a wreck. And that's what we've got going right now. And I'll quit.
Thank you, Dr. Thrasher. That was great. We're getting there right this minute. We're getting there right this minute. Our next speaker is Teresa Johnson. She's a third-generation cattle rancher on the U.S.-Mexico border where her family has ranched on the same place since 1918. Her family's ranch shares 8 miles of international boundary with Mexico. For the past 30-plus years, while raising her kids and grandkids on the ranch, she has seen the dynamic of the traffic coming across the border change dramatically. Today, she'll be talking about just a small portion of what her family has seen and experienced. Okay, here you go. Right up close.
Right up close. Good afternoon, everyone. Closer. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Russ Howell for putting this information and education meeting together and letting us all meet here. Russ asked me to come and talk to you about some of the issues that my family and I, as well as many others, face living on or near the border. My name is Teresa Johnson. My husband and I are the third generation to live and work on the same cattle ranch that was established in 1918. My children are the fourth generation, and my grandchildren are the fifth. Our ranch is directly on the U.S.-Mexico international border. We share a little over 8 miles of fence with Mexico. When I say share, I do not mean that when the fence goes down, we have a neighbor who pitches in and helps put it back up. It is solely on us to fix. My family has maintained this barbed wire fencing for over 100 years. My father-in-law tried to get any and every federal or state agency to take responsibility for that fence, to no avail. He finally replaced the fence in 1975 out of his own pocket. Around 2008, about 5 of those 8+ miles were replaced with the Normandy-style fencing to deter vehicle traffic. It did not work. Vehicles drive where the barrier ends to the barbed wire fence, cut it or untie it from the post and drive over it, or they ramp over this vehicle barrier. If the vehicles are detected by Border Patrol, they try to get back to Mexico, but they do not care what or who is in their way. They will drive over the fence or they will drive over you. They do not care about the people they might run over or the people in their vehicles that they are smuggling. We have seen the ebb and flow of illegals crossing our ranch for decades. When there's talk of amnesty, we get a flood of people. When the Border Patrol concentrate on the trouble spots, the illegals find a new route. They never stop, they just change locations. All of our houses are within 3 miles of the Mexican border, with one being just a stone's throw away. They have all been broke into. Luckily, none of us were home when it has happened. On September 27th, 1990, my husband Joe and my brother-in-law Bill were driving by the chili fields on the farm, checking on how the harvest was going. Someone hollered at them to stop, so they backed up. When the truck stopped, Joe and Bill each had an Uzi pointing at their heads. They were surrounded by about 6 young men ranging from 14 to 16 years of age. They were all dressed in camouflage from head to toe, wearing grenades on their belt. Joe and Bill were told to get out of the vehicle. The brothers looked at each other in disbelief of the situation and once again told to get out of the vehicle as the young men cocked their weapons. They got out and were told to go stand by a nearby irrigation ditch, not knowing if they were going to be killed on the spot. The young men who had come out of Mexico then jumped in the truck and drove the 1/4 mile to the border to try and get back to Mexico. They got the truck stuck in a muddy ditch, abandoned the truck and fled into the Mexican village of Las Chepas. Officials from both sides were called, and as it turned out, these young men had been guarding a marijuana field in Mexico that had gotten raided, and they were looking for a four-wheel drive vehicle to make their getaway. When the Mexican officials got there, they searched the village for the boys. There were lots of shots fired in the village, and 3 of the boys ran back to the U.S. side. At this point, the Border Patrol went after the boys. These boys started shooting at the Border Patrol as well as Joe, Bill, and the other law enforcement agents that were at the site. The Border Patrol lost them in the mountains of a ranch, and they were never caught. The boys that fled into Mexico, the remaining boys, were caught, beaten by the Mexican officials, and placed in jail briefly. For a couple weeks, the Border Patrol would come by and look in our barns and buildings and to check on us. While we were greatly appreciative of the Border Patrol efforts, we never had a sense of safety. On that day, my in-laws could have lost their 2 sons. My sister-in-law and I could have lost our husbands, and our children could have lost their fathers. But we were blessed. As with all agriculture, our children grow up working on the farms and ranches. We teach them every aspect of the business, starting with simple chores like feeding animals, cleaning stalls and barns, cleaning out water troughs. But with the influx of the illegals, you could not let them do these things by themselves. When our children got to be school-aged, we would kill ourselves trying to get home before they would, so they would not walk into a yard or house full of these people. In 2005, we had 500 plus illegals crossing our ranch on a daily basis. 8 miles, okay. In 2006, that number rose to 1,000 plus crossing daily. These are not numbers I pulled out of thin air. They are the numbers Border Patrol counted going across our ranch. It got so bad in our west pasture that we had to pull our cattle out for about 3 years. This pasture, which is approximately 4 miles wide, had 54 established human trails crossing it in 2005. By the next year, there were 256 established trails. We had about 50 cow-calf pairs in the corral sick and had lost 17 calves all in 1 week. We were afraid that the illegals had brought some disease in on their shoes, and it was affecting our cattle. After getting the state veterinarian down to the ranch to do some testing, it was determined that our cattle were breaking out into Pasteurella pneumonia from the illegals continuously running our cattle off of water. When my daughter was a teenager, we were checking water near the border in one of the ranch pickups. I was letting her drive because she was trying to get her hours in for her driver's license. We heard some shooting near the farms, but didn't really think anything of it, as it might have been one of our nephews shooting rabbits or something. It turned out to be some Mexican bandits shooting at a group that had crossed into the U.S. The bandits had stolen money from the illegals and told them if they came back to Mexico, they would be killed. They ended up running to my sister-in-law's house, scaring the hell out of her. You never have a sense of safety, whether you're at home or working on the ranch. When you're working on a water trough, it is pretty common for you to find trash, hypodermic syringes, blister packs of meds, and even feces. Our work in agriculture is dangerous enough without having to fear for our lives. Before we got the Normandy-style fencing in the flat country, We fixed places on the fence that were cut or pushed down on a daily basis. Sometimes we would make a morning and an afternoon run to the border to fix places in the fence. One afternoon, I went to work on the fence by myself on the four-wheeler. All 5 strands had been cut, so it was going to take some time to fix. I was on the ground splicing the last strand when a couple of vehicles on the Mexican side came by, hauling a bunch of men carrying guns. I was instantly sick to my stomach. I prayed they would think I was a boy since my hair was up in a cap and not rape or kill me. Thankfully, they waved at me and I waved at them. I was lucky. I don't know of anyone that lives on the border or even north of it that doesn't have the same or worse things happen to them. Sadly, it happens everywhere. I know many of you think that since you don't live on or near the border, you cannot be affected. You're wrong. You are dead wrong. I know a young Border Patrol agent who was married with 2 children and another baby on the way. His wife worries about him every day. This agent goes to work, and when he catches illegals, not only does he run the risk of getting beaten or killed at their hands, but risks catching a disease that can be put off onto him by a touch, a cough, or a speck of blood. Then he goes home to his wife and children, and they are exposed. We have had 2 fires on our ranch. They were set by illegals that had gotten lost or left behind because they could not keep up with the group, so they would start a fire to signal someone to come and get them. Each fire burned a couple hundred acres. I just saw on the news that the El Paso sector of the Border Patrol has reported a 434% increase in apprehensions and a 1,689% increase in apprehensions of families. The issues and incidents I am telling you all about is coming to your homes soon. This is a crisis. This is a crisis of epic proportion, and something needs done now, not later. I have a few pictures that I would like to show you. This is where the sign is. That's the Mexico border, and that's the vehicle barrier. That sign is a sign put out by the Mexican government to warn the people crossing of the dangers of scorpions and rattlesnakes. Now, the sign doesn't tell you that it's illegal for them to cross. It's just warning the people that are crossing. Oh goodness, get that out of the way. Well, you can't see it. There are, that white sign's covering it. This is a group near the Mexican border. I was out horseback checking on some cattle. I wish you could see it, I'm very sorry. There's about 8 or 10 illegals crossing. They weren't afraid of me in the least. This is less than a half a mile from my house. There's 54 in that group. And like these other gentlemen are saying, who knows what diseases they're carrying. But this is within half a mile of my house. This is at a water trough, or at a water tank actually, and illegals had broke the float off, and most of our water systems are on either solars or electric pumps, so that pump continued to run and run the water on the ground. That was constant. This is at a tank where they had stomped on the valves there to get water. That was a constant instant. This was, they'd taken the sliders out of our gates at the corrals to light a fire. This is one of the fires that they lit as a signal fire on our place. This is one of our dead calves. It was nothing. You'd come up to water and they just drop. This is an instance where this calf, he had stepped on a sardine can, because they leave an enormous amount of trash. And he'd stepped on the sardine can when he was small, and that band around it didn't come off. So as he grew, the band got tighter, and it almost completely cut his foot off. Those are the Border Patrol buses that would haul the illegals. When they'd catch them on our place, they'd haul them to El Paso. And those two buses kept Highway 9 pretty hot. This is looking into the Mexico border. This is part of the barbed wire fence that my father-in-law replaced in 1975. You can tell the Mexico side there. That's part of the Normandy-style barrier, and it was put in as a vehicle barrier, but you can see it's not very hard to cross. This is more fencing. This is near, that little village is Las Chepas, and that's the end of the vehicle barrier. And as you can see, it doesn't take much to drive around that. That's the vehicle barrier in the farming area, and it's probably 3 foot tall at that top rail. There's no, as you can see, there's no livestock component to it, and that's actually pretty tall for that area because it goes down to where it's maybe 1 foot tall. These are 2 horses that crossed out of that low barrier from Mexico. That's more of the Normandy style barrier. And that road right there, that's in Mexico. The government come in and bladed that new road that parallels the border. And if you know anything about Mexico, they don't turn any screws just because. It's there for a reason. There's going to be, I don't know, buses or truckloads of people coming in pretty quick, we believe.
Was that a recently graded road?
Yes, sir. This is from a drive-through. That's pretty common. When the fence goes down, we have to fix it because if our cattle get into Mexico, they're gone. We don't get them back. There's another fence down. Another drive-through. Another drive-through. This one, they took out about 100 yards of fence on that deal. That took us a while to fix. in places where we have steel posts, you can see how many clips are on that. They undo the clips and they'll stand on the fence and drive over it. Well, after that, then it'll pop back up and it looks like it's up, but it's all loose. This one, I guess we're not going to get this video. Push it again. Nope. There it goes. This is a drive-through that my son filmed. And what had happened, he was on the backhoe going to fix some water leaks. And a border patrolman was kind enough to stop and tell him to get the hell off the road because there was a drive-through coming. And this guy had a stolen vehicle. And they will take you out. It doesn't matter. They'll take you out, and thank goodness he was able to get off the road. That's a very common occurrence. It was happening at one time when school let out and all the school buses were on the road. Now, how would you feel if your children were on the school bus and these people are driving through there, possibly running the school bus into a ditch or turning it over?
He was driving down the middle of the road and he said drugs and people.
Yeah, he had drugs and people. This vehicle come from the Mexican side, and it was a smuggling vehicle, and they tied the steering wheel so it was fixed, and they put a brick on the accelerator and aimed it at a skybox that the National Guard were in. And luckily, it never made it to the skybox. They were trying to send a message that they weren't welcome here. And it got stuck in a rat den and burned to the ground. You didn't hear about that in the news, I'm sure. Yeah. They try to kick that one under the dirt. No, ma'am. I sure do. I know, it's very disheartening.
We're going to have a question and answer session as soon as all the speakers are done. So if we could hold questions, that would be great.
This is another picture of it. The Columbus Fire Department came and put the fire out. And I don't know, maybe I watched too much TV, but I assumed ATF would be there, a news crew. Nothing. It didn't happen. This one, he didn't make it quite to the border, but he ran a checkpoint, and it was, again, a stolen vehicle. And he ran from the Border Patrol, and I believe this incident, he went through 3 of our fences. And then it overheated and caught on fire. Now, the Border Patrol did get that guy, which was great. But a lot of times they don't, because when they get back to the fence, they bail. That vehicle, they didn't pay for it. They didn't pay for anything, so they're not concerned with anything that's in their way. Okay.
What I heard, it sounds like the most effective method is bullets.
Are you just going to say?
We have been asked, if it is so bad, why don't you just move? First of all, our family does not tuck tail and run. Being in agriculture, you face challenges on a daily basis. So no, we will not tuck tail and run. Second, we should feel just as safe living a foot off this international border as we would 1,000 miles from it. This is our home, our livelihood, and we are here to stay. In 2005, our then Governor, Bill Richardson, put our southern border in a state of emergency. With our apprehensions and our increase in violence exceeding far above that year, why does our new governor not listen and hear us? She maintains that this is a humanitarian crisis. She is right, but it is a crisis for the American public, not the illegals that are coming over here to take advantage of our lax systems. We need a wall. We need it now, and not just for me and my family, but for you and your families. Thank you so much for listening to us. I hope you will all walk away with a little more understanding of how we live and what we have to live with. I don't want it for us, and I dang sure don't want it for you. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's going to be a tough one to follow, Ed. Our next speaker is Ed Ashurst. He was born and raised in Arizona and has spent the last 22 years on a large cattle ranch in the southeast corner of Arizona. He has authored 8 books, including Alligators in the Moat, Politics, and the Mexican Border.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. I am without a doubt the least among you. Greatly appreciate any patriotism and courage that's in this room, and I think there's quite a bit of it. I've been, like many of you here, I've been involved in a number of media interviews, and a few months ago I was interviewed by Canadian Public Radio, and then a couple months after that I was looking on the internet and there was a couple thousand comments about the interview, and I was astounded at the utter stupidity of most of them, in that very few people really knew what they were, they didn't make any sense. And opinions are fine, we've all got them, that's the good old American way, and I have more opinions than anybody in this room, but you can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. And I wrote my book, a great deal of it of which is horror stories, like we've just heard, and they're important and they need to be told. But I also tried to deal with the cause of all this nonsense, and my thrust today, I want to present you with facts. I can get pretty wound up. There's a few people here who've heard me speak before, and the tin on the roof has been known to melt a time or two. I'm going to try to stay calm, and I'm going to conduct myself like a gentleman. I don't want to be accused of being a demagogue. I'm going to give you facts, and it is my belief that the horror stories are great. We need to hear them, and we've all told them, but we also need to deal with the root issues and the future. I believe that the United States of America is in a watershed moment, And I believe what is going to happen in the next 2 years is of tremendous importance and perhaps tremendous, tremendous change. And I'm going to give you some facts to support that concept. Fact number one, the border is not secure. Now, I'm not going to elaborate on that, and I probably shouldn't even mention it, but I want to build a foundation for what I'm going to say later on. And the fact is, any politician or employee of the Department of Homeland Security that tells you the border is secure doesn't know what they're talking about. You can go to any border town on the Mexican side of the line with a sack full of cash, and if you get connected with the correct people, you can be in Chicago or Washington, D.C., your passage virtually guaranteed within 48 hours. And that's a fact. That is a fact. Fact number two, the Border Patrol is not on the border. The Border Patrol operates under what they call in-depth strategy or strategy in depth. I've heard it both ways, which is generally attributed, the authorship is generally attributed to a gentleman named David Aguilar, who, among many positions held in the Border Patrol, finally became the Deputy Border Patrol Commissioner, highest Border Patrol agent in the nation, a spot that should have been confirmed by the Senate, but they couldn't get that done. In-depth strategy basically means the Border Patrol has retreated northward to Highway 9, Highway 80 in Arizona, Highway 90 in West Texas, and Interstate 10. And to not dwell on this for any great length of time, I can take you, there are large sections of the international boundary, some of them 60, 70 miles in length, where there is virtually no federal presence. Now, I'm not going to waste your time by talking about this a long time, so believe me or don't believe me, that's your choice, but it's a fact. David Aguilar was quoted on May the 2nd, 2010, in the Arizona Republic newspaper, the largest paper in the state of Arizona, saying these words: "Policymakers need to understand that the border is not a fence or a line in the sand, but a broad and complex corridor, 30 to 100 miles wide. Those who think border security can be understood in terms of a judicial line don't understand border dynamics." He went on to say that that corridor is a third country that joins Mexico and the United States. This is the highest Border Patrol agent in the nation. That statement, besides being unconstitutional, is rather absurd because people like Teresa and my friend John Ladd and myself, Gary Thrasher, we live in those areas. I see Murray and Judy Keeler back there. Have you ever been notified where the capital of this new third country is so you can quit sending your taxes to Washington, D.C.? I'm going to give you, I'm a writer, I like books, I read books, and the highest selling book of all time, with the exception of the Bible, is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I'm going to give you a tale of two ranches. In Presidio County, Texas, am I leaning on you, Erica?
No, you're good. You're fine. Go for it.
In Presidio County, Texas, there is a very famous cattle ranch owned by a fellow named Jim White and his family. It's called the Bright Ranch, B-R-I-T-E. It's been in the same family for about 130 years. I don't know exactly. I have been there to that ranch. I've done a considerable amount of business with them, bought about 3 semi-loads of bred replacement heifers and some herd bulls. And in the course of the last 15 years, I became good friends with these people. Jim White and his family have suffered tremendously because of the narco Mexican combatants like Teresa was talking about. Their property has been molested, they've been molested, and I could tell stories all day long. Jim White is an interesting guy, one of my favorite people, and in his paraphrased own words, he said, I got to thinking about it. I was mad all the time. I was tired of being angry. I was tired of being molested. I was tired of the incompetence of the federal government. And I realized I was part of the problem. And he said, I decided that instead of being part of the problem, I wanted to be part of the solution. And so Jim White, he locked all the gates to his ranch, very large cattle ranch, and he left one gate open on the south end of his ranch. If the Border Patrol wanted access, they had to go down to the border and come in from the south. They didn't like that. They fought him on that. He took a considerable fortune of his own money and created a large Buckeye camera system on his property with real-time live photos going into his computer in his home. And he started helping the Border Patrol track these Mexican narco combatants that were crossing his ranch. Then, with the help of the congressman in that congressional district, a gentleman named Will Hurd, he became in contact with a company in Southern California named Anduril, A-N-D-U-R-I-L. The folks at Anduril had created some new radar technology where they could hone in, and I'm not a techie guy, so I'm probably saying this wrong, but they could hone in on an object, get GPS coordinates on it, and track it, and take real-time photos sent into wherever, and they wanted to sell it to the Border Patrol, they wanted to sell it to the government. The Border Patrol has technology similar to this, but it doesn't work, whether it's out of date or incompetence, I'm not sure. But the folks at Anduril needed a place to test their equipment. So with Will Hurd's help, they came to the Bright Ranch, and they set up, I believe it was 3 of these radar facilities. They're quite mobile, they're a lot smaller than the Border Patrols, and they're about 10,000 times more effective. They taught Jim White how to maintain them and use them. This was about 15 or 16 months ago. In 3 weeks, they caught 4,200 pounds of dope, I don't know how many hundred of aliens, and within a month, they had totally shut the traffic on the Bright Ranch down. Not 80%, 90%, but 100%. Now, the significance of this is very important. Jim White did not use 1 cent of your money. He took the bull by the tail, took time that he could have been doing other things on his ranch, took his own money, and he solved the problem. It's been 15 or 16 months. I talked to him this morning. He was going to be here today, but he had some problems on his ranch and couldn't be here. But I asked him, so tell me again, he told me a couple weeks ago, he says, so how effective is it? He says, we have a 100% effective rate. Jim White and his family and his employees, they know how to track, they know what tracks look like, and they know their ranch. When he gets a real-time photo on his computer screen, the technology has GPS coordinates. It is able to hone in on a person and follow them down a canyon or across the flat, whatever. He emails that information to the United States Border Patrol. He goes to the north end of his ranch, unlocks the gate, and he takes them down there, and they catch every single one of them. Now, the government and its employees are going to say, well, that's just one place. You know, they're just going around him. No. All of us cowboys here, John Ladd, the Keelers, the Johnsons, Gary Thrasher, numerous others, will tell you, to my knowledge, this has never been done. And they didn't use any of your money. Okay, a tale of another ranch in Naco, Arizona, Cochise County, Arizona. From Naco to the San Pedro River is about 13 miles. 10 and a half of those miles is the southern boundary of the San Jose Ranch, which is owned by the Ladd family. John Ladd and his beautiful wife, Jo Beth, are sitting right down here. Two of my best friends. In the town of Naco, adjacent to the Ladd Ranch fence, is a brand new Border Patrol station that cost you $50 million. It has an indoor shooting range that cost you $15 million. There is a powder magazine there with enough ammunition to kill every narco in the state of Sonora. There is a dirt road that is as wide as this room that you can drive a Ford pickup down 70 miles an hour. You can be from the Brian Terry Station to the San Pedro River in 11 or 12 minutes. There is, on the southern boundary of Ladd Ranch, the Roosevelt easement, the best fence that has been made to date. In places it's 18 foot high. The least it is 10 or 12? 10. Just lately, they've put up razor wire on it. The traffic across the Ladd Ranch has never stopped. In the last 30 years, there has been 3 million illegal aliens cross John Ladd's property. That's documented. Since February of 2012, there have been 53 drive-through Dodge diesel 3/4 ton crew cab pickups with 1,500 pounds of dope cross John Ladd's ranch, and the Border Patrol has not caught one of them. That's a fact. I'm not promoting anything but the facts. Those are facts. There is 3 multi-million-dollar cameras on 85-foot towers on the Ladd Ranch that are supposed to send real-time pictures into the Brian Terry Station, which is on the edge of the Ladd Ranch. There are hundreds of electronic sensors, ground sensors on the Ladd Ranch. There is a mobile camera unit and an MSC unit, and hundreds of Border Patrol agents. The traffic has never stopped. In the last few years, it is documented that the federal government has spent $54 million of your dollars on the Ladd Ranch, and the traffic has never stopped. So, in Presidio County, we have the Bright Ranch, a Texan cowboy. I hate to admit it, man, them Texans can brag. He took the bull by the tail with his own money, and he shut the traffic down. In Cochise County, we have the federal government spending $54 million, and the traffic has never stopped. Those are facts. I'm sorry. What's the difference? The difference is motivation. Jim White is motivated. The federal government is not motivated. It's as simple as that. Okay, moving on. I have, in August of 2010, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North came to my house to film a War Stories episode that I was in. Cochise County Sheriff Larry Deaver brought him there. North had with him an individual by the name of Chuck Holton. Chuck Holton had been an Army Ranger, was in the Black Hawk Down unit. I believe he was involved in the invasion of Panama when they captured Noriega. Chuck had got acquainted with North and he became his cameraman. He also edited some of North's books. He also is author of 6 or 7 books of his own. He also is an independent war correspondent. He works for numerous media outlets. Chuck and North, for years and years, have gone all over the world filming war stories and turmoil on an international scale. They don't go to Tahiti and film the girls in bikinis drinking Corona beer. They go to Mogadishu, Baghdad, Kabul, and places like that. About 2 months ago, when Russ first called me and asked me to do this, I started gathering information. I called Chuck. I said, "Where are you at?" He says, "I'm on the border in Iraq, and we're sneaking into Syria tomorrow to film what's going on there." I asked him to be here today, but right today, he's in the Ukraine filming the unrest there. Chuck is probably the most knowledgeable guy about international politics, war, and suffering of anybody I know. When the caravans first got started, however many months ago it was, Chuck was sent to southern Mexico to research and find out what was going on. He spent quite a bit of time down there, several weeks, and he just roamed around talking to people, trying to be incognito and gathering data. He wrote a lengthy report, and I have a copy of it here. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to read several paragraphs here. So listen closely. This is about the caravans. The migrants are not being paid to join the caravan, but they are being organized, encouraged, and supported in their trek, organized by opposition political elements within Honduras who are themselves supported by Venezuela. Many people I spoke to today joined the trek because they saw the advertising for it on social media and heard about it on the local news in Honduras. They are being organized by a consortium of left-wing pro-immigration groups, including the United Nations, International Organization for Migration, whose mission statement states, IOM is dedicated to promoting humans and orderly migration for the benefit of all. Also, the International Migration Institute, a Soros-funded organization, gives money to the Alianza Americana, who has been tweeting from Mexico showing their group supporting the caravan. The Honduran and Guatemalan governments are officially discouraging this irregular migration, but have little to lose by it happening, since even in Honduras, if Honduras loses the 60 million or so they get annually from the U.S. government, the money Hondurans in the U.S. send back to Honduras accounts for nearly 20% of their total GDP. There are probably at least hundreds of people in this caravan who have been to the United States before and have been deported at least once, which would make them felons. 2 guys I talked to today had been deported 4 times. I have footage of one of them admitting to being deported. There are international observers who are following this convoy and claim to be impartial and only there to observe. I watched them insert themselves between police and immigration agents and the caravan today and defend the caravan. They are not impartial. 2 were from Spain, from the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation, and 1 from Mexico. This year, I have spent significant time in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico, and while the conditions in Honduras are certainly poor and there are problems with gangs, the vast majority of those people would not qualify for asylum in the United States. If these migrants are allowed to enter the U.S., why shouldn't the other 9 million Hondurans head north also? Chuck After being there, little time went by and he came to El Paso and he went across to Juarez and he filmed migrants who had been stopped there and had not been successful in crossing, and at that point they had been deserted by these left-wing pro-immigration organizations, and they had at that point became pawns in those people's hands who are masters at maximizing people's misery. And by filming and reporting on that, they were able to make political points in Washington, D.C. There were reportedly about 400 of these migrants in the caravans ended up in Agua Prieta, Sonora, which is close to where I live. The local narcos there didn't want them there. They didn't want them setting the apple cart in their local system, so they rounded them up and put them in a makeshift concentration camp on the south side of town. You didn't hear that on CNN, did you? There are, from reports I've got right here, 5 to 6 murders weekly in Agua Prieta. I have friends who live in Douglas, and they can hear at night gunfire across the line, some of it coming from 50 caliber machine guns, and Mexico has the strictest gun laws of anywhere in the world. I have another friend named Mark Hager, who is a history professor at a university in Hickory, North Carolina. Mark is also a very patriotic fellow who has come out numerous times to the Southwest. He's been involved in the production of about 2 or 3 documentaries about the border. He has also spoke extensively on this subject. Mark did his own research on the caravans and came up with this. Organized but not paid by socialist-leaning groups in Honduras, Venezuela, George Soros groups, and by the United Nations Food Accommodations propaganda stating American sanctuary cities are recruiting and needing illegal aliens. 90% are young, 20-year-old males. And he goes on to talk about the narcos charging as much as $7,000 a head to facilitate the passage of these people. Mark Hager and Chuck Holton are not acquainted with each other. They did not collaborate on their research, and they did not talk. I have another report here that says the illegal alien invasion that the Lordsburg Border Patrol Station has had to deal with has gone up 500% this year in comparison to the 10 years previous. Recently, I get nervous when I'm sitting there, Erica. Recently, Donald Trump made the mistake of telling the world that he was a nationalist. The word nationalist has become equivalent to profanity, vulgarity, and created quite a stir. One member of the House of Representatives said publicly that Trump reminds him of Hitler. Another representative said Hitler rode a wave of nationalism and anti-Semitism to power, replaced the anti-Semitism with the thought that all Latinos crossing the border are rapists, drug dealers, and murderers. Does that sound familiar? In other words, accusing of Donald Trump of saying that. Emphasis on Trump. French President Emmanuel Macron said nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism. Let's look at the facts of nationalism. Samuel Adams, John Adams, Eldridge Gerry, Benjamin Rush, John Hancock, Paul Revere, John Paul Jones, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and the most liberal thinker of his time, if not of all eternity, Mr. Thomas Jefferson, were all nationalists. The phrase, "one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all," is a nationalist slogan. The word nation is the root word for the word nationalist. The Revolutionary War was fought to create a nation. The Civil War was fought to preserve a nation. The Second World War was fought to defend a nation. Many of you may not know it, but Adolf Hitler was this close to having a nuclear bomb. Had we not fought, he would have dropped it on New York City, Washington, D.C., and you and I would have Nazi grandchildren. On September 11th, 2001, radical Muslim terrorists flew airplanes in the World Trade Center, killing over 3,000 innocent Americans. They did that in an attempt to destroy a nation. We are at a point in history where these left-wing pro-immigration groups that I mentioned before and the exceedingly corrupt government in Mexico, who Chuck Holton saw, by the way, passing out pamphlets telling the immigrants which the best 7 cities in America to go to acquire asylum. The exceedingly corrupt government in Mexico and the Mexican drug cartels have become blood brothers. They may have different reasons for wanting to breach the border, and their processes, their plan of attack may be different, but their goals are identical. And one of the main things they have in common is their uncanny genius to manipulate the 21st century American politician. They are experts at maximizing the misery of others. There is no shortage of American dollars at their disposal. And their goal, first and foremost, is to maintain an open border and destroy the sovereignty of the United States. There was a recent statement by a gentleman by the name of Daniel Baranowski, a Harvard professor, said the Mexican foreign minister just said while in D.C. for a conference that Mexico expects more than 700,000 migrants will traverse his country in caravans on their way to the USA this year. This was made 5 days ago. There are myths well propagated in the United States by the Blood Brothers that we need to expose, and they're totally false. Number one, the border cannot be secured. That's nonsense. If we had the will and the leadership in the Congress and the Senate and the governor's mansions throughout America, the border could be secured, could be, by secured, I mean illegal traffic crossing the international boundary could be shut down in 2 months. That's a fact. And I ask you this. We send American boys and girls by the hundreds to Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and we bring them home in body bags, missing arms and legs and eyeballs, twisted, maimed, and scarred for the rest of their life, and they go over there to protect the sovereignty and the border of Middle Eastern nations. And we won't do the same here. I have been exceedingly opinionated about the United States Border Patrol. This isn't the Border Patrol's fault. The fault lies 100% in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate, in the offices of the governor. There are a lot of really good patriotic American citizens who wear green uniforms. They are only following orders. Recently, yesterday, that's pretty recent, in the Washington Times newspaper, there was an article written by Stephen Dinan, D-I-N-A-N. You can do the research and read this yourself. The article was titled, House Votes in Favor of Illegal Immigrant Voting. Washington Times, March 8th, 2019. This is what the article says. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read you the first 3 paragraphs. Written by Stephen Dinan. House Democrats voted Friday to defend localities that allow illegal immigrants to vote in their elections, turning back a GOP attempt to discourage the practice. The vote marks a stunning reversal from just 6 months ago when the chamber, then under GOP control, voted to decry illegal immigrant voting. Here's a quote. We are prepared to open up the political process and let all of the people come in, said Representative John Lewis, a Georgia Democrat and hero of the civil rights movement. He told colleagues this as he led opposition to the GOP measure. Read the full article in the Washington Times. We are at a watershed moment, ladies and gentlemen. The answer, I'm an optimist. I think we can fix this. I really do. But I'll tell you what it's going to take. It's going to take you. You need to get yourself informed. You need to read books. You need to do the research. And you need to find out what's happening. And you need to gird your loins with the spirit of truth and take courage and stand up and look those lying so-and-sos in the eye and tell them the truth. By giving an illegal alien the right to vote, you have slapped in the face people like Mr. Johnson, John Ladd, Murray Keeler, I could go on and on and on. People who have worked their butts off for decades, generations, acquiring property, contributing to the local and the national economy, conducting themselves like law-abiding citizens, and going about the political process in a lawful manner. We need to stop this, and we can. I believe we can stop it, but we will not stop it. Every major political revolution that has ever happened, including the Revolutionary War, was started by a very small group of people at the grassroots level. And that's what you are. I'm probably the dumbest guy in this room. I just happen to be a guy that can talk. There are some of you out there that have the ability to do great things, patriotic things, important things. I challenge you to do them. You've been very kind. God bless America.
If I could, I would like to share some very important information. I would like to share some very important factual information. The U.S. military had over 20 aerostats. The eye in the sky out here on Hermanus Road, the balloon, the blimp, whatever you want to call it. Our military had over 20 of them that had a camera on it that could see for 25 miles and give a GPS coordinate within 12 inches. So we can see, we can do it all, right? Our military gave those aerostats with the camera because they were done with them. They used them in the Middle East. They were very effective. They gave them to the United States government, i.e. Border Patrol, and they sit in the desert in Arizona with not anybody using them. All they have to do is put them up. 25 miles, 12-inch GPS coordinate. Now, I'm sorry, but if we have a Border Patrol agent, when you give them a GPS coordinate and it's within 12 inches, can't get there and find what the camera sees, they don't deserve to be working for us. But that does exist, and I can prove it. So we have it. We're not using it. Our government is screwing us.
We're not done yet. We still have 3 more people that are on the agenda to speak. So if you'll just hold on, we will have question and comment session as soon as we are done with our presentations. Our next speaker is Yvette Harrell. She served in legislation for 8 years, and she is going to be talking about the cost of illegal immigration to our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's tough being up here with these guys because they sort of steal your thunder. But I'm going to
quiet down, please, so we can hear.
Uh-oh. Well, we better get our crowd back because this is important. So think about it, $120 million in street value for fentanyl that our border agents...
We are not finished. We have speakers that came a long way to speak today. As soon as they're done speaking, all of you will have a chance to have your say as well.
$120 million in street value for the fentanyl that the government, the Border Patrol agents just apprehended. 77 walls around the country, around the world, including Saudi Arabia, Finland, China, and parts of Mexico to secure their borders. And right now, giving our families and farmers and communities and counties the relief and the security they need by building a wall and securing our borders is priceless. And that's what we need to be talking about, and that's why we're here today. And right now, I want to thank everybody that made the time to come, and especially those who have served our nation and our families of farmers and ranchers who live on the border, who put up with this crisis every day. Because right now, politicians are saying we don't have a crisis, and guess what? We know that we do. And if you want to talk about the elephant in the room right now, talk about those 4 seats right there that are empty. The governor of New Mexico, U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich, U.S. Senator Tom Udall, and Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small. That's the elephant in the room. That's why we have a problem. Thank you. I'm telling you, it matters in the elections. I didn't think this was political, but guess what it is? Because when you give illegals an ability to vote in an election, people know right now, and what he just said is right. This isn't about protecting our American way of life. This is money. This is about votes. Politics is out of it. Where it's at is at the polls. And if you haven't paid attention to what happened in the last election, not just CD2, but all over the nation, if you don't think we don't have a problem on our hands that is way beyond what is happening with our ranches and our farms, that's where the problem at. That's the problem right there. Because people do not want to admit and understand that you're living in a nightmare. We have a problem on our hands. It is epidemic, but the way we do it, we take it back. We take it back with our voice, with our vote, and we start standing together, and we start telling people we are not going to support politicians who think that they live in a place so far away, Washington, D.C., that they cannot connect with the people of this county, of this state. And quite frankly, right now, everybody in this room will be responsible for over $80,000 in their lifetime for the immigrants that come here illegally. They are using services and products and education systems and welfare systems that 1% of the Americans are paying for. Think about it. It is unsustainable to think that 1% of our earners, our taxpayers in this nation, can sustain not only taking care of our own, but now taking care of others. And I just want to point out some of the numbers, some of the numbers that are very important to us. I mean, and this is crazy. And these numbers are coming from the Border Patrol. These are not made up. This is not CNN. This is not fake news. This is not talk about it because we think bigger is better. This is the real deal. According to the Border Patrol, I mean, this is what we need to be talking about. According to the Border Patrol, when the other person was talking about the number of families that have been apprehended, in just the El Paso sector, in just this region, 36,298. But you know what's even worse? 290% increase in apprehensions of minors alone. And when you have these people coming across Mexico from South America to a broken promise, and right now a broken system, that is unfortunate. It's unfortunate for America, it's unfortunate for New Mexico, and quite frankly, it's unfortunate to the immigrants. And it's very unfortunate to the children that are coming across Mexico used as sex slaves, used in sex trafficking, used in other ways that are unmentionable. And you know what? Here's the problem. We're giving feral horses more rights than farmers. We're giving coyotes, and I'm talking the kind with hair and 4 legs, more rights than people. And if we don't stand up and get our butts to the polls and make sure we're talking about this stuff every single day, to the people that are going to listen. These people right here are the ones that can help us the most. These people right here are the ones obviously absent. These is not a problem for them, but in reality, it's the biggest problem we're facing in our state right now. The cost to America, the cost to our state, our counties. In fact, I've been working with many of you down here, talking to Judy Keeler and others, Joel Edwards. We've pushed your information to the Freedom Caucus. We've pushed the information to the White House. I was privileged enough to be on a conference call with President Trump just the other day. This border wall was way more than a promise on the campaign trail. This funding includes the stuff we need, as we were talking about earlier, we were just listening, the smart wall, the stuff that Congressman Hurd is talking about, the things that we can do, but this is about bringing sensors. This is about bringing humanitarian effort and closing the loopholes in our system, in our legal system. That's what we need. That's what that border wall funding does. And we have every single representative in the U.S. House that's a Democrat, unfortunately, voted against the funding, voted to allow illegals to vote. I'm telling you, the priorities are not right here. People are no longer the priority in this state, in this nation. Politics and polls are. And we've got to do something about it. And I am proud to be here and listen. I am proud to be on the calls with the president. I am proud to take information from all of you and pass it forward to Jim Jordan and others who have a valid interest in America. This is about our sovereignty. This is about our Constitution. This is about the future of our country and the future of the generations to come. So I will stand with you. I will talk for you. I will talk with you. And I will stand for America because I am proud to be an American and we deserve the protections. And God bless you and God bless America. Thank you for being here. You know what? You guys should get the hand here because you're living this.
Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. Okay, we have one more, I think 2 more speakers. Are Stella Padilla or Dinah Vargas here? They are? Okay, so they're going to give us a real brief rundown on the cost federally that the immigration is costing us, and then Gavin Clarkson is going to finish it up, and then we will open it to question and answer. But please, we need to be respectful. There's only 2 mics. I know everybody wants to say something, but we need to have a little bit of control in here during the open comment session.
Oh, no. You go, girl. I know, right? So everyone's giving me compliments. I'm here, making me even more nervous. So my name is Dinah Vargas, and I'm from Bernalillo County. What county? Can we get a county check-in? What counties are here? We got Luna County. We got Hidalgo. Otero County. Otero. Bernalillo. See, a lot of people here. Yeah. Doña Ana, there's a lot of people here supporting you New Mexicans that are having the greatest impact at the border. And so we've been kind of traveling New Mexico, Stella and I, just documenting the events and kind of putting them on Facebook and bringing it to the people. And online now, there's people praying for you and wishing you the best of luck and that they'll stand with you. So New Mexico is with you and all 33 counties because we're 33 counties strong, right? That means, yeah. And that means we only have 33 battles to win. That's real small, maybe. So I'm here today on behalf of the Republican Party of the great state of New Mexico, Steve Pierce, who's the chairman of the Republican Party. And he sent me up here with the sheet and has a bunch of numbers on it, and it's in the billions. We already know that. I can read them to you, but it kind of means nothing at the end of the day if we don't see how that's getting passed along. So the moment somebody crosses illegally, like the ticker starts, right? And money starts adding up really fast. So if we look at medical, if we look at education, if we look at all of these benefits that are being taxpayer funded, and if they're not taxpayer funded, they are, money is being spent by way of our social services or safety, like safety officers, federal agents and whatnot, and even incarcerating them, and then destroying the drugs or whatever it is that they're bringing over, or then investigating human trafficking and things of that sort. I, like my friend Yvette up here, am extremely disappointed that our politicians aren't here. The very ones that are saying that you have no crisis. How offensive is that? It's highly offensive. You know, not everybody can be an American. That's just how it works. That's just how it goes. And it's not because we don't understand the journey or we don't understand the dream. Of course we all do. Of course we all want what's better for us and our families, but not everybody can be American. And if you are going to be an American, you have to come over by way of doing it legally and then betray the country that you're leaving and become American. That's how it works, right? And so even if we just look at education, so by show of hands, does somebody have a school-age kid? No? Okay, wrong crowd. All right, what's another? Okay, there's a few of them. So let's say there is somebody who enters the United States illegally and they enroll their child into school. So all of a sudden, again, more money being spent on illegal, immigration, and that's why it's not allowed, because the burden to taxpayers is so great. So we have free or reduced lunch, and then all of a sudden we got classes or English as a secondary language, ESL, whatever it is, right? I don't know Spanish. I just have the accent like I do. It's crazy. I know the 5 words in Spanish. And so everyone's trying to always push me to the front. I'm like, I don't know Spanish. I've never been to Mexico. And so, so it's a big problem, and the tax burden to taxpayers is overwhelming, and it will deplete us. It will deplete us until we have nothing. Our government would be better off at this point just throwing all that money to the wind, because at least we know where it's at. And so I keep thinking, why does our government not represent us? Why do they keep saying, like, all of you are completely overreacting, you know? And then somebody mentioned racism earlier, right? You can't even say anything on Facebook, right, without somebody attacking you, calling you a racist immediately, right? When Stella and I corrected our party affiliation, because we've always been conservative. I was born a conservative. I'm a Hispanic woman. I'm conservative. There came a point that we had to correct our party affiliation, and then we became Republicans, because they're the only ones holding down the value of family. Right? They talk about not separating us from our families or people at the border from their families, but what about HB 51? Well, that's absurd. Like, who's running the show over there? Is it the Titanic, and is it gonna sink? It likely will. And so, again, we've been to 33 counties on behalf of Steve Pierce of the Republican Party to document the stories of people, right? You are the media. Media is not going to come down here and just cover the story, because in their mind it's the same story over and over, and they fail to do 2 things: separate the issue from it being a criminal enterprise that is what nobody wants and nobody is okay with, and then there's the undocumented, and many of them are coming over by way of the port of entries or rushing the fences, right? So who are those people coming? Those are Central American people, and they are fleeing a socialist country. That's what they're fleeing. And yet our government continues to try and make us into socialists. This is America. Somebody should remind them, or perhaps it's time that we start behaving like we are Americans, because not everybody can be an American. And even if you hate the United States of America, you still look up to us. You're still looking up to us, right? Right? So oh, they won't give it to us. They gave me a ticket out there. Apparently I was parked in front of a fire hydrant, see? Just kidding. I wasn't. But I understand your frustration. And even after today, what's going to happen? You're going to go home and, okay, well, we all went to the meeting, but how are we going to secure the border? Is your government going to do it? Is your government likely to do it? No, they're filing lawsuit against the President of the United States of America right now, right? They're filing lawsuits because people are coming over here and they're dying at the border because they have made the journey unprepared and they have brought their children with them, right? If we have our kids out past 12 at the movies, I mean, people start calling, you know, CYDF or whatever dysfunctional system is left in New Mexico, right? Is that not the truth or is it? It is the truth, right? So who's gonna fix this problem? And how are you gonna do it? Well, beyond voting, you gotta vote, and vote red, because if we ain't changing it red, we're not even securing family values. You know, we don't even talk about our sons of New Mexico anymore. And not that women don't have, you know, room to advance or anything like that, but they never talk about our sons, our young sons. How are they supposed to be men? You know, they're just supposed to get up and like go flip burgers for 15 bucks an hour? That's not how it worked. I remember you got up every day and you worked hard, and if you made the 15 bucks an hour, it's because you earned it, right? Because that's what being an American is. So there's this old, I guess, movement, if you will, because this is a movement, because this amount of people don't just show up in is this a gym, you know, on a Saturday, unless it's a movement. Are any of you affiliated with any large organizations? Likely not. A few, fine, a few. But for the most part, y'all just neighbors. All you have to do is one more day longer than the other guy. Longer than our government, longer than our governor, who continues to call you liars as if you're crying about it over here. And she goes on TV and she clears it up like it's not a big deal. And it's offensive. It's offensive to me, you know, whether I know you personally or not, but now you do, because you know I'm Dinah from Bernalillo County, and I know you from Hidalgo, and that's my neighbor over there. She's from Alamogordo. Yeah, I'm still trying to learn the counties. There's 33 of them, only 33 battles. One more day is all we got to do, and all we got to do is hold the line and come out. It's gonna, you know, if we could do it in 2 months, that would be with full cooperation with the government, but obviously we don't have that. So it's one more day, longer than the other guy. That's all we gotta do is one more day. And you gotta hold the line, you gotta be your own media, you gotta, you know, orchestrate a group of somebody collecting this information. Because obviously, if you're like the people at the Boot Hill, you know, down in Hidalgo County at Antelope Wells, if you call the cop, they'll likely kill you. Who would call the cops and report something? Nobody would. It's silly. There's not even cell phone service down over there. You know? It's absurd. Buses run 80 some miles with kids in the bus, American kids in the bus, and no cell phone service. It's absurd. There is a crisis here. Yes? Is there a crisis in New Mexico at the border? Does our government have to do something about it? Yeah. And if they don't, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hold the line. What are you gonna do? We're gonna hold that line, right? We'll get all 33 counties down here. We're gonna try to do that anyways. I mean, you saw there was a few more different counties than the one you live in, right? So it's growing. It's a movement, and it's one more day. That's all you gotta think. Start organizing within yourself. Collect data, collect media, and if you're afraid to put it out onto social media because that is a real concern, then send it to somebody, send it to us, and we'll put it out. We'll take the risk with you. Chairman Steve Pierce will take the risk with you, and we'll create something so we can document all this stuff. But we need boots on the ground, and we need everybody looking out for everybody, because obviously I think it's just us. It might be just us. So that's all I got. I won't take up more of your time. I'm collecting names, so, you know, or go to the Republican Party of New Mexico page, drop us a message, and leave us your contact info, and we'll get right back to you. God bless you, and God bless the great state of New Mexico.
Thank you so much for coming. Okay, our last speaker is Gavin Clarkson, and then we will open up the question and answer session. So I'll need our speakers back up here, Ed.
How y'all doing? Is this frustrating as hell? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna make it worse. Because I'm gonna give you an aerial tour of the entire length of New Mexico's border. And I'm gonna show you how totally unprotected we are. But before I begin, Marina, stand up for a second. This is my lovely wife, Marina. Many of you have met her over the years. Marina, her family has been fleeing socialism and tyranny their entire lives. Her mother fled Franco in Spain. Her grandparents fled Mussolini in Italy. They emigrated to Argentina, and they had to deal with socialism and tyranny all over again with the junta. So she crossed into the United States legally because she was sick and tired of socialism, sick and tired of totalitarianism. She followed the rules. She got a work permit. She got a green card. But it took her 14 years to get her citizenship. That's because our system is broken. And what we have today, Marina, thank you so much. You are a proud American. I am blessed to be with you. How many of the guys in here are with me in the We Married Way Above Ourselves club? That would be me. So, but Marina talks about, one of the things we talk about is how the system gets gamed every single day. So what I want to do is I want to show you a little tour of the border. How many of y'all have seen my videos on Facebook where we talk? Okay. For those of you who haven't, I'm going to do a really short video, but I've got lots of footage. And as the speaker before said, if you're afraid to post something, send it to me. I'm not afraid of anybody. So I'll post it, and I'll make it, and I'll take the heat. Don't worry about it. So, but if you want to see some of the detail of some of the tours that we're doing right now, but I'll start it out here. So basically, New Mexico has 179 miles of border with Mexico. 34 miles of that just now are what we call primary barrier. That's what's referred to as the wall. As the president just announced, we just built another 20 miles. So this video was taken before that extra 20 miles was put in. And this video was, so this is about a year old. But only 19% of New Mexico's border today is defended by primary barrier that even old fat guys like me can't hop over. So we obviously have a broken system. We obviously need to fix it. And I want to show you how bad it is. So we're going to start in El Paso. Now, how many of y'all have been to what they call Monument 1? Anybody here? All right, Monument 1 is where Texas, New Mexico, and Old Mexico meet. And I'm doing the overflight here, but if you want to, I've got some video from on the ground. But literally, there's no wall, there's no fence, there's not even a pile of rocks. What there is a line in the concrete right next to the monument. So here is Mexico. Here is the United States. Literally, you can cross the border that quickly. And when we talk about the system being broken, this asylum fraud is a scam. It is a total scam, and I can prove it. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions. But every single day at Monument 1, you have Brazilians showing up. They fly into Ciudad Juarez. They take an Uber over to Monument 1. And of course, they know the game, they know the drill, they know how the fraud works. So they have a child in one hand, they have their carry-on luggage in the other hand. They show up to Border Patrol at Monument 1 and say, asilo, which is asylum in Portuguese. Poof, they have legally entered the United States illegally because they're lying about it. They're claiming asylum from Brazil? Come on. But yet, they know that the backlog is a 2.5-year wait before they have to have their credible fear hearing. And basically, you know what the coyotes and the cartel refer to us as? Logistics. Because all they've got to do is get the migrants 1 inch inside the United States and poof, your tax dollars pay for them to get shuttled over to Santa Teresa, and they get shuttled back to Annunciation House in El Paso at a free plane ticket to join the Brazilian community in Boston. How many of those people do you think show up to their credible fear hearing? Somewhere less than 3%. After they get all, you go by the airplane, all of a sudden you see all these ankle bracelets in garbage cans. It's a scam. It's a fraud, and it happens every single day. Well, yeah, at least they're, you know, but you can think, you know, could they at least give us back our taxpayer-funded ankle bracelet? Anyway, so let's start the tour. So here, I'm flying over El Paso here, and now, just so you know, this video, it's about a 2.5-hour trip, so I've condensed it down into 4 minutes. I'm happy to have you all sit around for 2 hours watching my video fly, but I don't want to do that. But basically, so if we start here, here is Monument 1. Where's the laser thingy? You pass that down. Yeah, that's a technical term, the laser thingy. Okay. So here we go. So right here, if you go to Sunland Park, right across is Anapara, but you go a little bit far down to what they call the brick factory. Right there is Monument 1. There's no wall, there's no fence, there's no nothing. And it happens every single day. So then you go over the mountains a little bit. And if y'all saw so we fly over, here's Monte Cristo Rey, and then we get to Anapara right here. Now, these are the train tracks. And what you have is the trains stop by, and sometimes, of course, it's all coordinated with the cartel. They'll do some barrier to stop the trains, and poof, all of a sudden people start climbing over the fence, jumping on the train, and then magically the train starts picking back up again. I'm part of the Human Wall El Paso group. We go down there. I'll actually be out on the border, spending the night on the border because our group is because our wonderful governor decided to pull the National Guard away from the border. There's nobody out there with eyes and ears. So we've got the night scopes. We're out there on the border, pointing the stuff out. So and sometimes you actually, you know, who knows? I might even have migrants surrendering to me on Monday night. We'll find out. But basically, what they'll do is this is Mexico. This is the U.S. This is primary barrier right now. But again, it's only 18-foot primary barrier. It's not the not the 30-foot barrier. But it still, again, is better than nothing. But then we keep going. So now we're heading off to the port of Santa Teresa. Of course, you see you've got all the Mexican roads on their side. So now we get to Santa Teresa. Now, of course, every time Xochitl Torres Small and Governor Lujan Grisham go down and they take a fact-finding tour of the border, where do they go? Santa Teresa. Guess what Santa Teresa has that no other section of New Mexico has? The wall. How many of y'all saw that knucklehead Jim Acosta doing his tour in McAllen? He's walking past the wall and he says, "Oh, no crisis here." Yeah, you knucklehead, there's a wall there. So anyway, at Santa Teresa, there's a wall, and they meter the migrants, so there's an irregular flow, and basically, we are a compassionate nation. We allow more legal immigrants into this country than any other nation on the planet. But we want to do it legally. We want to know who's coming across. And we can do that. We have the tools at our disposal. We just have a total bunch of knuckleheaded, gutless pukes in Congress that won't stand up and do the right thing. So, when you want to take your friends and show them where there's no crisis, of course you take them to Santa Teresa. But then, very quickly, we pick back up. Whoops, wait a minute, what happened? Oh my gosh. It went away. Again, 179 miles of New Mexican border, only 34 miles are covered by primary barrier. The rest are vehicle barriers. Some are the New Normandy style. Some are just the posts and rails. And then there's, as everybody's been saying, there's a whole bunch of nothing, which is just barbed wire fence. And even that, obviously, when they can just drive something through that and it disappears, and then everybody, all the problems that everybody's talking about happen all along the length of that border. But let's keep going, because it gets bleaker. All right, so now we keep going, and eventually, again, there's a whole bunch of nothing. And we're on our way. We're now going between Santa Teresa and Columbus. Oops, wait, here, let me go back. That was we dipped down just to show you. That's Normandy barrier right there. So, so there is this, and again, you remember the Normandy barrier was erected to keep the Allies from retaking Europe. How'd that work out? So, and again, and I like the gentleman earlier, the brave men and women of Customs and Border Protection are doing the best they can with the tools that we're giving them. We're just not giving them enough tools. So, you know, every time you see somebody in a green uniform, those are the Border Patrol, those are the people that cover the border between the ports of entry. And then at the ports of entry, you have what's called DHS field operations. Those are the people that actually do the metering and the port of entry work. They're all part of the Department of Homeland Security. They're all part of Customs and Border Protection. But Border Patrol is its own separate subunit, but they're all trying to do the same thing. They are trying to protect our southern border, and this is all the tools we're giving them. So now we keep going. And so eventually we're going to come up. So, oops, wait, where'd that Normandy barrier go? It went to a whole bunch of nothing. Now, well, here, I'll back it up here. Well, no, again, there is vehicle barrier, but what you'll see, and I posted this on my Facebook page, where what they'll do is they'll back up a truck to one side, you see the tracks pulling up, and then they pull up a truck on the United States side, they just toss it across. You know, and sometimes it's people in duct tape that they're tossing across. I mean, the really horrific stories about human trafficking. You know, how many of y'all saw Kirstjen Nielsen, the Department of Homeland Security, testifying with our brilliant Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small? The moment that Secretary Nielsen started schooling her about how we actually need border protection and actually need a physical barrier, you notice how quickly she shifted over. Far more interested in the welfare of the illegal immigrants once they get here, rather than stopping them from coming across in the first place. And again, I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm in love with and I'm married to a legal U.S. immigrant. And aunque parece como un gringo, yo puedo hablar suficiente español para vivir aquí. So, you know, the moment they call me a racist, I respond in Spanish and whip out my tribal ID card, and that pretty much shuts them up. So, but again, this is what when Xochitl Torres Small talks about all the barrier that is protecting New Mexico, I'm not going to call her a liar, because you can at some point get to a number where she's not totally inaccurate, but she says that's protecting us. Some cases, that barrier, because of the blowing sands, is a foot tall. But she calls it a barrier. She calls it a physical barrier, and it's a whole bunch of nothing. Now, by the way, the president announced that we had built 20 miles of primary barrier at Santa Teresa. That, just like Israel's southern border fence, which stopped their illegal immigration, stopped 99.7% of Israel's southern border illegal immigration. Their border wall costs about $2 million a mile. So does ours. So if you think about it, if we've got 179 miles and we got 34 miles of primary barrier already, that means we need 145 miles of primary barrier. It's $290 million. There's more than the president didn't even have to declare an emergency to fix New Mexico's border, because he's sitting on $400 million of confiscated drug cartel money that he could use to spend it today. All right, so let's keep going, because it gets worse. So we're going to spin along and spin along and spin along. Eventually, we're going to get to Columbus. Now, I did another video from Columbus. Some people have talked about, the situation there. We went and documented every morning. How many of y'all have been to the Columbus Port of Entry in the morning? No, first thing in the morning, go at 6 o'clock and sit there in the parking lot, and you will see 700 anchor babies going across the border. Now, and what they do is their parents will convince Border Patrol, oh, we need a humanitarian visa to go have a baby in the Deming Hospital, because it's too far to drive to Ciudad Juarez. And of course, the CBP guys say, look, we can't turn them down, because if they're not lying to us, and the woman or the baby dies, then there's hell to pay. But what happens is you have 700 anchor babies that have been born here in the Mimbres Hospital here in Deming. They live in Palomas, Mexico, fraudulently maintain a residence in Columbus, Mexico, and every single day they cross the border with their birth certificate, and poof. Oh, wait, here we go. I went too far. Sorry. Let me back up here a little bit. All right. So now, by the way, this is about a year old, so if you've been to Columbus recently, so this is the old border crossing right here. They've now moved the new port of entry a little bit upstream of that. But basically what you have is 700. You know, sometimes they're 4-year-old kids or 5-year-old kids walking across with their birth certificate. You know, and again, under the existing law, they've been deemed to be U.S. citizens. We obviously need to fix the law. We need to eliminate chain migration because that's the source of the anchor baby fraud. So, they cross the border every morning with their birth certificate, and your tax dollars here in Luton. How many of y'all have kids or grandkids or sent your families through the Deming Public Schools? Your tax dollars are paying for a crossing guard at the International Port of Entry. Your tax dollars are paying for 17 buses every morning to pick those kids up, take them to Deming Public Schools, give them free breakfast, give them federally subsidized lunch, and then give them a return trip back, all at taxpayer expense, and they don't even live here. It's a fraud. Oh, no. And again, we talked to Border Patrol. They said, no, we have been directed not to hassle the kids. And again, I don't blame the kids. And I actually don't even blame the parents for, you know, if they see the system is broken, well, you know, I mean, we're obviously pretty far south to be playing hockey. In hockey, you're allowed to crash people on the boards. You're just not allowed to beat somebody over the head with your stick. But what is happening is the law is being broken. Fraud is being committed every single day. And Xochitl Torres Small is not lifting a finger. She will not even admit that we have a rampant asylum fraud problem here in New Mexico. So here is Columbus. So now we're going to take our tour towards the boot heel. And very quickly you see Columbus, and then there's a little bit of vehicle barrier, and then as soon as we get to the boot heel, it's literally nothing but barbed wire fence for miles and miles and miles. Now along the the U.S.-Mexico border, you'll see every so often you have these monuments that show you where the border is, and sometimes that's little, oops, wait. What happened? Oh my gosh. Yes. As you go over some of the terrain, that's your border. U.S. on this side, U.S. is over here, Mexico's over here. How do I know? Because I've been over it many times in the air. So, but, well, okay, so, and there are markers every 3 miles or every 4? I mean, there's a series of markers. Every series, so you can go, so there's a survey line they've been doing. But again, sometimes there's not even a fence. So let's keep going. We'll make the turn. So now the fence picks back up again, and then it's going to disappear again. And again, some of this is because they've only been able to spend so much money, and so they spend the money where it's flatter. But as Congressman Kinzinger said, where do you think everybody's going to do all the human smuggling? They're going where the fence isn't. So again, here as we're approaching the boot heel. There we go. Let me make the turn. All right. So here, if you've been out, how many of y'all have been to Monument 40? Okay. So let me put this down. This is the downside of having sped up. There we go. So basically, you can see. Where we've got the border going here, and then it turns around here. So here's Mexico right over here. There's New Mexico, and there's New Mexico, and a whole bunch of nothing. And it's remote for the people who live there. It's also remote for Border Patrol. It takes them a long time to get out there. So one of the things we were talking about, what can you do? I know the Oath Keepers folks are here. And there's some other, I mean, if you want to volunteer to be eyes and ears for Border Patrol, there are mechanisms to do that. Now, some people are not ready to do that, but if you are ready to be sitting there at night, uncomfortable, you know, with no running water, you know, a porta potty doesn't, you know, that gives you away. It's basically a bucket behind a sheet. You know, we can hook you up if that's what if you are interested. I mean, that's what I will be doing that Monday night. So we keep going. Now we're heading south along the boot heel. And again, just a road and a fence and a whole bunch of nothing. And then we'll hit to, I think it's Monument 56, we'll make the turn to the west. And you can just see, it's just, there's a little bit of vehicle barrier, but then there's back again to be a bunch of nothing. Well, I mean, you know, it's road-ish thing. And so we're coming up here. So you see, obviously, lots of agriculture on the Mexican side. More ranching on the U.S. side. And then we're coming up here. So when we turn west again, we'll now be heading to, there's a marker, and boom. So there was marker 53. Back it up for a second. All right. There you go. That is the corner right there. Mexico's all over here. Here's New Mexico. No wall, no barrier, and barbed wire fence that's up about half the time. And anybody who wants to smuggle drugs, or they want to smuggle children, I mean, we can get really graphic, and I don't want to because, but I mean, how many of y'all have heard what a rape tree is? Okay. I'm going to get, with your indulgence, I will try and make this as clinical as I possibly can without over-exaggerating. But a lot of the human smuggling is about money and power. And part of what the coyotes do is they want to dominate these women because many of these women and these children are being sent to the U.S. to be subservient sex slaves. And so what they will do is along the journey, they will establish their dominance. And so some of the ranchers probably in this room, and I don't want necessarily to have you identify yourselves because I don't want the coyotes to come after you, but we will find trees with undergarments hanging in the trees because they have raped the women to establish power. Secretary Nielsen testified this week that every single young girl over the age of 10 has to be given a pregnancy test because it's highly likely that she will have been raped along the journey. And some of these children, again, people show up as family units, but they are now discovering that they keep finding the same sponsors for the same children. Secretary Nielsen testified that they are recycling children in their asylum fraud system. So, how can somebody say that we are being anything other than completely compassionate when we want to make it harder or impossible to traffic in young girls for sexual slavery and human trafficking? So the people who live on the border have a very challenging situation. But we are also, when the Cowboys for Trump did their ride on D.C., we made it very clear, we're ready to defend the unborn, ready to defend Second Amendment life, or Second Amendment rights, but we're also concerned about the lives of the young children who are being trafficked every day. And I'll give you one more story as soon as we get to Antelope Wells. So we're going to make the turn here. Now, how many of y'all are from Hidalgo County? Okay. All right, I'm giving the cutoff sign, so I'll finish with my one story here. All right, so we're going to get to Antelope Wells, which is the most remote, most desolate southern border crossing in the United States, and the water is toxic. It is infected with Legionella. You don't want to, there we go. There, out in the middle of absolute nowhere. And Lordsburg is the closest town. It's about 90-minute bus ride away. And since October, you have had more than 35 large groups of migrants. CBP defines migrants as more than 100, jumping the fence at night, Tuesdays and Thursdays, typically. And they do this, and they surrender, and they turn themselves in because they know they've gamed the system. They know that they will be in the United States for 2.5 years as long as they're dragging a child, maybe even their child, probably not, and they've gamed the system. And most people outside of New Mexico had never heard of Antelope Wells until last December, when Jacqueline Calum Maquin, a little 7-year-old girl from Guatemala, was dragged by her father across a 2,000-mile journey along the Sonoran Desert, and she died. Now, it is a tragedy every time a child dies, no doubt about it. But if a U.S. citizen had endangered his children by leaving them in the back of a hot car while they go in to maybe even steal groceries to feed their family, he would be charged with felony murder. 18 U.S.C. 1001 makes it a felony to lie to a federal official, and that includes lying about asylum claims. Jacqueline Senor Calcuz lied. How do we know he lied? Well, first of all, he left his 4 children back home in Guatemala with his wife, the younger children. So what was he fleeing? When the leftist media went down to Guatemala to interview the family, well, they said, oh, he's just going up north to work. And for those of you who are familiar with asylum law, the law is that you are supposed to stop at your first safe country. And Mexico offered him asylum, and he turned it down. So I have been taking a lot of heat for saying that the father was absolutely involved in immigration fraud, but under those 3 points, I could prove it in a court of law, and that makes him eligible to be considered for felony murder charges. And that may sound harsh, but it's also true. And just because it's harsh doesn't make it any less true. Hold on. I know we're going to do questions. Give me just a second. I just want to finish up here, because now we're going to drive off into the sunset. We're going to drive out of the sunset, and you will see that literally now we got a whole bunch of nothing. Maybe a little bit more vehicle barrier, but now as we go off into the mountains along the New Mexico border, for the rest of this tour, it is absolutely nothing. Oh, wait, I was wrong. Maybe a little bit more vehicle barrier. Not the Normandy South, again. But the moment you get back off in the mountains, you're going to get back into nothing. And again, in Arizona, when the congressman was doing his National Guard tour, this is where the coyotes were dragging the people. And this is just as hard for Border Patrol to get to, and yet they say there's no crisis. I'm Dr. Gavin Clarkson, and I'm here to tell you there is a crisis. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thanks, Gavin. Okay, so if I could get, is Dinah still here? Would you mind coming up in case they have some questions for you, please? And Yvette, there she is. Gavin, where is Gavin at? Will you come on up here? I'm sure they're going to have some questions for you as well. I'm going to step down now so we can have room for all the speakers up here. I just ask that you please address with respect. I know that there's probably some different opinions and different views on all of this, but please address with respect and handle your, we have 2 microphones, so let's take turns. Thank you, guys. Oh, and real quick, if anyone's interested in buying the Alligators in the Moat book, Ed has a box here for sale. So if anybody wants one, we've got some here.
Excuse me.
You can't hear?
Hello.
How's that? No?
Better. Hello. It's not even on.
Hold on a second. Do you know why this mic's not working? Testing. Is that better? Okay.
Testing.
Okay. All right. So like I said, I'm going to step down so we have room for all the speakers up here. Please address with respect, and opinions are going to vary, so please just be cordial and respectful of each other. We have 2 microphones, so let's take turns on each microphone. And then also Ed has the Alligators in the Moat books here for sale if anybody wants one. So after the meeting is over, you can hit him up for one. Thank you all for coming out, and I'll open the question session.
Me? Excuse me. I'm Rachel Valencia from Silver City, Grant County, and we've heard everything that's going on at the border. I think we all know what's going on at the border. What I came to listen to is solutions. I didn't hear too much about that. But in Grant County, they were trying to restrict the company with more water restrictions, regulations. And 1,200 or 300 people showed up at a venue like this. Only about 600 people were able to come in, and the rest were outside. And what I'm trying to say is that we got the commissioners to do a resolution and send it to Santa Fe, and that got the two bills, or at least one bill, I'm not even sure, but we got them to stop with a bill, and it rolled over. And Rebecca Dow had a lot to do with that, and our county is very grateful to her. We're even having a party around April the 19th, 9th, around there. But what I'm trying to say is that what we need to do, I think, is to do the same thing. Get your county commissioners to do a resolution to bring our National Guard back to the border. That's what we need to do.
That's a solution right there, right?
We have about 90-some% counties who backed up the sheriffs on the gun laws. We can get the counties, if we organize, we can get each county to turn green also, and force her, or at least make her think how much or how many counties are standing together to bring back our border, our National Guard back to the border until the border wall is made. Otherwise,
I'd like to interject something here. I think we have something to respond to that. Yes, please. This is Barbara Reedy, one of our county commissioners in Luna County.
I'm sorry to jump in front of you, but it relates directly to our previous comments. Yesterday, I'm Barbara Reedy. I am one of 3 of your county commissioners. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm one of 3 county commissioners. We have very much made ourselves aware of these situations that we do have down here. We are very much in support of our community. We have done everything that we can at this point, and we intend to do more as it comes forward. But we did pass a resolution 1914 supporting the presidential declaration of a national emergency concerning the southern border of the United States.
You can pull in front of me anytime.
My name's James Logis. I'm from Austin, Texas. I came down here in 2006 and built the Antelope Wells border station. And I'll tell you, while I was down there working, there were people crossing. And I'll put it like this. I had one come up to me at gunpoint in my truck when I was getting ready to go home at the end of the day, working 10 hours. Yes, I keep a gun in my truck. But you know one thing? I came all the way from Texas to say this, is us being American people, we need to stand up and start taking charge for our own selves. If we want to do something about this, to stop the immigration, we need to stand up and as American citizens unite and help the Democrats, the people that work in office, do something about it, and we need to do it now.
My name's Tom Nelson. I'm a firefighter from Grant County. I live in Hachita. I also work as an EMT in the city of Columbus. We have been absolutely inundated with illegals. And it used to be we were getting people, you actually felt sorry for them because you knew they just wanted a better life. Now they're carrying guns. We've had people held up, had cars stolen, we've had people held hostage in their homes. And it goes without, you're never going to hear it on the news. In 2014, 6 of the major wildfires in the state of Arizona, 6 major, over 10,000 acres, was because an illegal got in trouble and couldn't find anybody, so he lit a campfire. How much did that cost the American taxpayers? In Columbus, we go to the port of entry. Well, last weekend, all of my calls were there except one. We have to take them to Deming. They're abusing why the Constitution was written. They are no more citizens of the United States than the man in the moon. Columbus has over about 2,500 people and has over 5,500 P.O. boxes and has a waiting list. We watch the buses pick up the kids every morning and bring them back every night. I myself have delivered babies in the back of an ambulance that I know are going to be American citizens, and that is just wrong. But the question I have for everybody in this room, the UN treaty says the first country you come to, you're required to ask for political asylum there, right?
Right.
How come we're not just putting these people on a plane and sending them home? A plane ticket would be a lot cheaper, just send them home.
You're absolutely right. That's what we should do. Unfortunately, the ACLU and all of these other pro-immigrant groups will file a lawsuit, and I guarantee you, I'll give you one guess where they file: San Francisco with the Ninth Circuit. And the challenge we have, and you point out the thing, there's a whole bunch of myths that the left will tell you. They say that the 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship. And here in New Mexico, we have absolute proof that that's not true. Every American Indian here in New Mexico was not a citizen until 1924. If the birthright citizenship of the 14th Amendment was guaranteed just because you were born within the confines of the United States, then why did, my father was the first American Indian to fly a jet. He was born in 1925. If he'd been born in 23, he would have been born, but not a citizen. So why did we need the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 if birthright citizenship just meant a geographic lottery? So that's something that's demonstrably false. The other thing, and I'd be interested in your experience in Columbus, because the other thing they say is, oh, gee, they say that apprehensions are down. Well, first of all, that's not true recently, but the other thing is the big change in apprehensions, and many of y'all have probably seen this in your communities. It used to be Mexicans, now it's Central Americans, and the law says we cannot deport Central Americans the way that we could deport Mexicans. So we have a really big change in the way the system's going.
Thank you. My name is, oh, you're next? Okay, sorry.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Reynolds. I live here in Luna County. I have worked in this county as a law enforcement officer for most of my career. I've worked on the border as Department of Homeland Defense. I've worked at Antelope Wells. I've worked at Columbus. So I understand what everybody here is talking about. I've seen it for many, many years, many years. I said that just so that you understand where I'm coming from. And first of all, I would like to thank everybody on the panel for taking their time to come down here and speak with us. But I'd also like to offer some critiques. You have lost half of your audience here because this is now turned into a 3-hour meeting, and half of these people have left. Those walls were all lined up. This whole entire area was full. Now it's half empty. You're defeating your purpose, okay? Just some critique on that. The other thing is whenever you have a rotten apple, what do? You cut out the rotten part so that you can salvage the good part. The first speaker was dead on. We need solutions. We don't need rhetoric. We don't need rah-rah cheering. We're all going to stand up for our rights. We need solutions. What can we do now, today, tomorrow, the next day, to make an impression at the Capitol that they are not representing us the way we need to be represented? I have written, you know what I get back? Form letters that say, oh, we appreciate your input. We thank you for your input. I have called and called and called. You know what I get? I get assistants that say, Oh, what's your zip code? Thank you very much.
Let me tell you something. When you call a senator or a congressman and bitch, it doesn't do any good. You have to put it on paper and you have to handwrite it because they feel like every time they get a letter, there's 1,000 other people who feel the same way and are too lazy to write a letter. If you write a letter, you will get results. Handwritten letters are critical.
May I answer your, first of all, thank you. Very intelligent comments, and I appreciate your experience. I did give some solutions at the end of my talk. I could talk about solution all night if you wanted to hear it. But the first level of a solution, there's a small core group of people in this room, the gentleman with the videos, John Ladd, the Keelers, the Johnsons, Gary Thrasher. I have been on, I don't know how many news shows. I wrote a book. I have been told 100 times, if you don't shut up, they're going to kill you. That's the truth. So the first solution is you speak out. As an American citizen in the private sector, we do not have the opportunity to go to the Capitol in Santa Fe or DC and compose and vote on laws. The main thing we can do is the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press and maintain truthful rhetoric. You're right, we need solutions. I totally agree, and I've got lots of ideas. But the first thing you do is you stand up and you speak the truth, and when you do that, you are threatened. So
I think all these people here have been standing up and speaking the truth for a long time. We're not getting heard. That's the problem.
I am in total agreement. I'm in total agreement. I wish I had a better answer. You keep on beating the drum. And if you've got a better idea, I would like to hear it. You are a very intelligent gal, and I believe you are on the same page as us, and you got some better ideas. I'm all ears.
Thank you. My name is Mick Rich. 3 years ago, I came down to Deming. I thought about running for the U.S. Senate. I met with Judy and Murray, went down to their ranch, took a look at it. I looked at it, I was there, and I'm going, man. And I called my wife, Marion, and so I'm heading out of Dodge, heading out of their ranch, and I'm going, nobody should live that way. A month later, Martin Heinrich was down meeting with the two of them. And the comment from him that I saw from the emails was, Martin Heinrich was no problem. Nothing I can do here, and headed back to his home back in Maryland. 2 years ago, I came down to Deming for the Border Task Force meeting. I'm excited today because back then there was probably 30 people at that Border Task Force meeting. We talked about what's going on, just like we did today. But here was something that I couldn't believe, that the representative for CD2 that was there, not our congressman, but that individual said, people were saying, how do we get heard, just like we are today? How do we get heard? What do we need to do? And the staffer said to all of us in the room was, if you want to be heard, you got to organize and you got to protest. And I need to make it clear to everybody here. I made the commitment when I came down here 3 years ago, I'm going to do something about it, and I ran for office. I'm challenging everybody here today to pick a race, run for office, help somebody to win that's going to make a difference for our state, our country, that's going to secure the border, make that commitment. And today, when you leave here today, get a phone number, reach out to somebody, get organized. We got to turn it around, and it's up to us and nobody else. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank all of you and all of us for being here. My name is Susan Moore. I come to you from Catron County. I know a lot of you, and I just love what New Mexico and America are trying to do right now. The reason why I stood up here is I wanted to thank you, but I also wanted to invite every single one of you. We've got a movement going on here in New Mexico, as some of you recognize. I am the Catron County administrator, administrator for the Catron County Patriots. I invite each of you, if you have a Facebook, type in your county. Okay, so like Luna County Patriots, and you will find us. It kind of spurred off of the coalition against Lujan Grisham, and it's huge. And what we're finding out is just common, everyday, ordinary citizens like you and I, we care. These are our homes. These are our kids, our ranches, our grandkids. Your grandkids should be able to go out and play and be kids. So I just want to invite every single one of you. I'm Susan Moore on Facebook, Susan Arizona Moore. If you need me to answer your questions, message me, and I'll hook you up with your county, and we invite each other to help each other's counties, okay? All right, thank you, y'all.
I'm Carol Williams. I'm from Lincoln County. I live in Capitan. And I'm here because I know that the citizens here near the border really need a lot of support. I came here with the hope to meet more people, to find out what people away from the border can do to help people that are closer to the border and who need support, because I know you need support. We are under extreme attack by our governments, and Trump aside, you gotta love him, but he can't do it all. He can't fix what's been going on for 150 years. He can't fix it in 2 years, and we need to take responsibility for not complying. We have a citizen obligation to refuse compliance 100% of the time for any action that is taken against us or any law that is passed that is unconstitutional. We have to have the courage to do it, and we have to do it en masse. If it involves payment of our taxes toward unconstitutional efforts, we need to stop paying taxes. If we need to carry guns with us all the time, we need to carry guns with us all the time. Infringement is anything. We absolutely have to have the courage to turn this around on a person-by-person, citizen-by-citizen basis, and we have to help each other. And anybody who would like to contact me, I would welcome it, because I'm here to network to find out how I can help.
I'm Evelina. I don't think this mic's working. I'll yell. Oh. Okay. I'm Evelina Lancaster from here in Deming. We moved here 10 years ago. It'll be November. It's changed since we moved here, and I moved here from Yuma, Arizona, so I know what a border is. I was born in Germany to Army. My mother came here as a German immigrant with my father. Took her 7 years to become a citizen. She worked hard to learn English. She learned how to do the work that was required, and it took her 7 years. She studied at the kitchen table with us kids while we got ready for school, and she studied after school with us. My mom is 82 years old now. She is an American citizen. She says, I'm an American. I gave up my German citizenship to become an American. She is proud to be an American. And I'm proud to be an American from an Army soldier. I'm a military wife of 27 years. I'm now with my partner. He came here today to listen to this. He has cancer. He was in Vietnam. He's gone through chemo for 6 weeks, radiation for 6 weeks, but he hasn't gone out of the house, but he came here because this is important to him. We live on the back side of the mountain. If you go to Rockhound State Park and go straight over it, we're on the other side. We moved to a remote area because he just didn't want the chaos of Yuma, Arizona anymore. It was becoming a trashy area. And I know Monty Wilmuth, the sheriff there, my dad was in the sheriff's department there when I was a kid until he had heart attacks and died. He worked on the ground to keep the drugs out of Yuma when I was a little kid, and I'm 60 years old. They laid out on the ground, and they watched the drugs come across the border, and then they arrested the people that brought them in. Then they let the people come to pick it up, and then they arrested them. It's right now, it's just like it's all coming in so fast, and nobody's watching it. I live on the backside of the mountain. And recently, I just seen a neighbor that is moved here from Utah about 5 years ago, built off the grid. They're across the field from us where we have only open range. They told me that recently a man came to their house, a young 20-year-old man. Now, he had to walk across the desert from Columbus on that side of the mountain because there's nothing out there. He came to their house well-dressed with a backpack on his back and told them that he was staying at their property for the next 3 to 4 days. And they told him no, he wasn't. They'd give him some water and they'd send him on his way, but he wasn't staying with them. These people are in their 60s or 70s. And the wife stepped back and called 911. It takes about 40 minutes for sheriff's department to get from town to our house. And they got there and they took the man away. Don't know what happened to him because we don't know what the new ruling is if it goes to the sheriff's department. I'm telling you, when you see something, you can't just let it go by. You have to call. You have to videotape it. You have to take a picture of it and let somebody else see that it's happening in your area. There's not too many people. I have a quarter of a mile before I have my next neighbor. So if I see it, I have to report it. If you see it, you have to report it. And if enough of us keep calling, somebody will have to respond. And this man was waiting to take over somebody's property so somebody else could come in there with either trafficking, drugs, or something else. And they thought they found a vulnerable family, but this family was smart enough to use their phone and call while they were talking to him. One other one called. But what if he took over them?
Go ahead.
So if you see something, report it. That's the first thing. Take a picture of the person and then show it to the Border Patrol. But if we just keep telling them that we saw it but we didn't report it, there's nothing that can be done.
Thank you, Lena.
Ma'am,
have to be
I want to say
stopping.
something to you. Couple things. First of all, God bless you. God bless your mother. We're proud of her. But on one thing, I think you're not playing square with us. You're not a day over 39.
We don't have a whole lot of time left. We have maybe time for 2 more. If you want to stay after that, you're welcome to. But as we've been told, people are needing to go home. So a couple of more, and let's call it a day.
Hello, my name is Steve Pulowski. I'm from Bernalillo County. Hello, my name is Steve Pulowski. I'm from Bernalillo County. And Galvin, I'd like to speak to that young lady sitting next to you. I'd like to speak to you in private. I want to address your issue. I have the skills to do so, but I prefer to discuss those issues in private. In the interest of time, I'll surrender my time for the gentleman behind me.
Nikki Shore. I'm a resident of Luna County. I'm a beekeeper, and I was called out by a rancher down there in the corner of the Boot Hill last year to come take some killer bees out because his cows weren't able to get to water. I am armed. I keep my firearm on my side. I don't know what I'm going to encounter down there in the boot heel in your area or in my neighborhood. I'm armed inside of my house a lot of times because you've got illegals coming across and knocking on the window and asking for food and water. It has to stop. And the first thing, and I thank you all because you are starting the education process. And as the other lady said, in a way you're talking to the choir. We're aware of it. The next process that we need to do as citizens is to start informing everybody else because not everybody else reads the paper. Not everybody else watches TV. They're busy working 2 jobs and they're taking care of 4 or 6 kids and they do not have time. And one of the suggestions that I have to do is start getting out on the street corners with signs and making sure we're posting what laws these people are passing. Full-term abortion? This is outrageous because until we get these people out of office, nothing is going to change. And it doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or Republican, it's what they believe in. If they believe in some of these issues, if they believe it's okay to have open borders, if they believe it's okay to kill babies after they're born, if it's okay to take away our Second Amendment rights to defend ourselves, we need them out of office. And that is the next step. It's educating the other people.
I do have to clarify one thing. I do not live in the Boot Hill.
Folks, I'll let you guys know I did go to Santa Fe here about a week ago. And I stood up for HB 51, I think that's what it is, abortion. Okay, one thing I'd like to do is say, build a damn wall. Okay? Another thing I'd like to say is educate yourselves, people. Educate the other people. Educate all this younger generation. This younger generation don't even know what the Constitution is. You know, educate us, everybody. Get on Facebook. Get on whatever you can. Find out what the laws are. Find out who's passing the laws. Let's stop voter fraud. Let's you know, get together on all this stuff. If we don't group together, if we don't get together and we don't stand up for our rights, we're going to lose them all. You know, here we're losing our gun rights. You know, I'm not going to elaborate a lot on the gun rights or abortion or anything else because this issue or what we're here for more than anything else is the wall. You know, okay, folks, let's build the damn wall. Let's stop the damn drugs coming in. Let's take the time and patience and whatever it takes to get out there and voice and have your voices heard. Okay, you know, I'm gonna keep this short, but like I said, I was up there in Santa Fe, people, and we were fighting the same thing up there as we were fighting down here, you know. But thank you, and I want to say one more thing. Thank you all for being here. Thank all the sheriffs for following their oath, and thank all the cowboys for Trump for doing what they're doing. You all have a good day.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the question comment session now. If you want to have a question for one of the speakers, you can catch them right after the meeting. Just want to say thank you to all of you for coming. It means a lot. I know it's kind of reiterating some stuff, but we were getting it live feed, and we're going to try to get the word out. So thank you all so much.